It's me. Interesting. Hi, hello. I was gonna say, oh no, I was gonna say, what was I gonna say? Konnichiwa, buenos dias, and good morning, everyone. That's what I was gonna say. Today, look at that hang true at the bottom of the deck. I'm gonna be using the Lafruma Raw Rooms. I'm gonna pull before today's gonna be the tier in the Woden tier frig WTF. And I was gonna use the printed Lafruma, but I feel like the raw rooms would be truer to that proto tier energy. You know what I mean? One of those felt a little thick. And I have a drink. I almost put some alcohol. First, so this was my train of thought. I got the drink yesterday because I was going to go live yesterday. Well, I got the drink yesterday because I got the drink yesterday. And then I thought about doing an ICC with the drink yesterday, and that didn't end up happening for whatever reason. And then I had it today, and I was like, I could, because they didn't like fill it up all the way. There was a little bit of room, and I was gonna add some alcohol because I still need to finish that bottle. But anyway, it didn't happen yesterday. I had the thought to do it now, and then I was like, I can't add the alcohol because it's too early. And then I was like, well, somebody tell these people who the F I'm is. I drink when I want. Hello? Ain't no such thing as too early. But then I was like, also, I'm not an alcoholic, so I cannot drink the alcohol. That was the process today. I don't know what I'm gonna use with this deck. I kind of wanted to have them all pulled first, and then I was like, I guess that's the day today. And then I was like, oh, I'll just like go for like I'll pull the first cards first, and then depending on the vibe, then I'll get the other cards. And then, but now I'm like, oh, but I wish I already had them because if the deck is in that box, I'm gonna have to get up and get them. So there's these that are more convenient where I don't have to AFK, and then there's those where I would have to AFK. I think the first time I just moved it to a more convenient location, but I guess I'd rather not keep moving the box because it's heavy. Has it been 5 minutes? Oh, 2 minutes. Almost three. All right. So I kind of want to use the wild unknown alchemy, but also I kind of don't. You know what I mean? So I'm gonna get my straw for this drink. Actually, maybe I'll do this first because if I get up to get the straw, then I might as well. It's fine. If I got to get up multiple times, it's fine. I'm gonna get up and get the straw, and then we're getting into this, and we'll see. We'll see what's up. So today's energy may be a little interesting because I think it was last night. I'm pretty sure it was last night. I thought back to maybe the Frig one, right? When I was like Odin this and Odin that, and yeah, because that's when I used the Runic Tarot and the King of Swords Odin came out. Yeah, it was that one. And I just had the thought yesterday, last night, when I was like, I wonder if people like know who Odin is. Like I gave a low hanging fruit example. Um, but then was it the same video or another video when I was like, bring back the days of the oracles where they just spouted nonsense and people had to interpret and figure it out. you know? So now I'm like, well, I don't know. I guess I straddle the line. I should have had this yesterday. It's a little flat. Maybe not. Maybe that's just what it's like. All right. We got a zero refresher today. Zero. Maybe we'll look for Ganunga Gap. So I wanted to look for, because I think when I did the Frigg one, I think it was in the same reading because it was when I had just gotten the cards. I used the Norse divination, the Idrisil Norse divination cards, the Tarot Apocalypsis. It was the Tarot Apocalypsis, not the Runic Tarot. And the Lafruma printed edition, or just the Lafruma. And I think I looked for Anwilla and Igashalmer. I don't have to look for two, but I want to look for Tyr and I think Wickecraft because of. I was going to say Wickecraft because of the Akamar and Akranar. But that's kind of something else. I guess I could do Ganunga Gap. Since this is a Duncan Zero, here's another reading where I don't know what I come live and I don't know what I'm doing. Okay, let's just start and then we'll go from there. How about that? 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 Mm-mm, mm-mm. And if you're asking, no, Patrick, who is Odin? Um, I don't know. There was like something that I don't even know if it necessarily happened that caused me to go down a certain train of thought, or if the process just reached another loading milestone in the back of my mind and it just popped back up. Um, but I was like, yeah, that's like that Odin energy. And that's when I was like, I wonder if like people would even necessarily like see it. And then I was gonna ask Gemini because I don't know. There's that Thorn giant portal. We've been seeing Thorn a lot lately. I think the number changed because I don't think Thorn is. It might be 3 because it was 333, and I don't think Thorn is 33. So maybe it did stay 3. You know what's interesting about this Thorn? And the Fruma is behind it. You know what's interesting about this Thorn is with the way I drew it. Excuse me, and I don't remember why I did it like this. Maybe to make it look like a thorn on a rose or something. But it's almost like you could say there's this timeline, this blue timeline, and then this is like the Ganunga Gap that's emerging. So it's almost like words. Interesting. If I did look for Wickecraft, it would be between Godmouth and Sap Impassioned, which would actually fit. Interestingly enough. Huh. If I were looking for that, then that's what it. Here's Ganunga Gap. So even in the Ganunga Gap, it kind of has this, but it's like this diamond shape, right? And so it's like you can see the diamond sort of emerging. You see that? Like it's like, and that's this like giant portal. But rather than it being like a portal, it leads to the void, which makes me think of that hermit that we saw. And it was like staring into the abyss, but seeing the something of everything. I was gonna make that the title for the reading because I went back and I added some titles, And I feel like the titles were kind of like the vibe at the moment where I went back. It was like my impression of those things. Because I was gonna do that, and then I actually did the titles, and I was like, "Oh wait, I didn't do it," but that's fine. Maybe that's why we've also I don't know. I kind of like that because again, I didn't notice it in the printed edition because they like it was a solid color. But it's again, it's almost like the void is emerging as that portal space, which could be why it's like a giant portal and not just like a regular portal. Um, but it's like transversing the void. Now, obviously, that does call back to mind the one booster, the Magic the Gathering card booster pack with it was like the race or whatever, but there was like the super massive black hole that everyone was like racing around. I think I used the Quantum Tarot because there was some Pinnacles card that had like those stepping stones to and through the void. See, this look, I'm gonna have all this drink. Doing more drinking than pulling. Do I have a voidy tarot? It's fine. Let me pull the cards first. Has it been 5 minutes? It's been 11. How did it go from like I felt like I was rambling for 5 minutes and it was only three. And now it's been 12. We have 12. Haha, LOL. 12th and candle. Candle phosphorus static needs. Give it one more of these. Kusma moon with 12. Interesting. Okay. We'll go 3, 2, 1, and a cut. And I'm looking before and after. I could do Ganunga Gap, but I already said that because of the 0. Ganunga Gap is also 0. Thorn being the 0 that's coming out. Duncan 0. Right? Let's do that. We'll look before and after Tier, and we'll look before and after Ganunga Gap. Bottom of the deck again. Again, it's Thorn. And I originally I pulled them out to show you. I put them back in the middle, gave it a shuffle. The bottom of the deck was Leaf Shade. I keep shuffling it, and there it is at the bottom of the deck again. Thorn Giant Portal. Interesting. Thorn, Bjork, and Overlagoo. Okay. And then Feor, Fire, Ether, Life is here under the Overlagoo. We saw that rune on the ground. Excuse me. It may have been in that one card in the Runic Tarot. I don't think it was the Four of Wands. Was it the 2 or the 3? Where there was the fire, right? And there was the lady with the rune on her back, and then on the ground, I'm pretty sure it was the rune of beginnings. And then we saw the same rune on the 10 of Wands with the wizard guy, or maybe it may have actually been the 7 of Wands because I know he was standing up at the thing. And then we saw the King of Cups in reverse that had a bind rune that it read like the intention was to replicate the effect of something, but it was not. Oh, what I love about this trio though is because Ofrlagoo is could you see the cogs just grind to a screeching halt? Because it's like I know what the connotations of Ofrlagoo are. I wonder if that's why that not all the time. Sometimes maybe. I know what the connotations of what Ofrlagoo are, but those like don't fit the energy. And so that's why it was like almost building up and then immediately just like, but I don't know how else to communicate it. Sometimes I wish we could talk in like images. You know what I mean? Because I feel like I could paint the scene for you, but I don't know how to like put it into words. It's fine. This isn't necessarily what we're looking for anyway. But what I do love, again, you have this giant thorny portal that we see, at least today, it's coming out as like a void. That's a piece of the void and not just a regular portal. And that is the beginnings of this Ophrlagu energy. Oop, now it's in reverse. Maybe I'll keep it in reverse. And maybe that's the thing, right? With you, we go from one giant portal to like two, right? Two voids. It could be both halves. It's like instead of the whole thing, it's like you get this half and then this half sort of above it. And then there's this like not duplicitous, but this coupled energy because it's like two of them in Ophrlagu, this and this. It could be like that, like higher and lower, whatever. Anyway, I feel like in my mind, I know what this is. Maybe, maybe I should have used. No, it's still fine. It's like what 9:20 a.m. I do not need to be drinking alcohol this early in the morning. Because I was like, you know what? Maybe we should just go for that Oracle vibe. And then I was like, Oracle juice. And I'm like, no, it's fine. Okay. Well, now I'm wondering what cards actually came out. Part of this, it goes back to whatever the cards were, where there was that impression of, oh, it was when I used the Lafruma, where we had, what was I looking for? I feel like it was the last time I used the Lafruma. And there was the scent tested with the pear tree. We saw fruit bearing, and then we saw the pear tree, and then we saw ripening. And it was the Ripian. It was the maturation of that fruit bearing tree into like actually bearing fruit. Because you could say that like fruit bearing, like it has the potential to bear fruit. It doesn't necessarily mean that it will, but it can if the conditions are right, right? And then if the conditions are right, it will like flower. Maybe the condition is like being alive and the season. Anyway, it was that Ripian that gave that energy of like the vessel that matures to meet the energy that it holds and houses. And that's when it was that metaphor of like the Nephilim being abominations because it was almost a way to artificially introduce a divine element into a mortal vessel rather than the mortal vessel maturing to the point to house a more divine energy. It's like you just shove it in there and then things go all weird and wonky. That's almost this, right? You could say that the Thorn Giant portal, especially because this is the void abyss, this is the vessel maturing, reaching that maturation point to like bear fruit. And then this beginning, because again, it's the meeting of two halves. If we're talking biology, this would be our two. The sperm and the egg, girl. The sperm meets the egg, right? One half would be an egg or a sperm. When they meet and come together, that's when you get the baby. This would be like the baby, not necessarily the baby being born, but it would be the beginnings of the process of like the egg and the sperm fusing to form the zygote question mark, and then the embryo developing the splel sitting, the cell splitting, like that. So it's like that, right? Which makes sense because we're kind of sort of picking up where we left off. I feel like we had our filler episode last week, meaning what, probably 2 days ago. Anyway, that's it feels like that's where we are. Cool. So that's why it's like it feels like it could be energetically similar, but it's different. Almost like how mayonnaise and Miracle Whip could be similar, but when you've eaten enough sandwiches, you can taste the difference. I used to not be able to tell, but I ate a lot of sandwiches on campus one year. Now I prefer mayonnaise. Um, cool. Anyway, let's go. Let's go. Let's go. Let's go. This is so interesting. Also, we did have fire. The final card was fire, ether life. And I was like, because I was talking about it's like a vessel that had gone through such a profound spiritual change that it produced physiological changes, right? Excuse me, which, if you think about it, would make sense. It's almost like instead of, we only use 10% of our brain. And if we were to unlock the other 90%, we would be like Lucy, if you've seen the movie. But it's almost like our bodies, our vessels, the spiritual capacity of our vessel is like 5%. And that 5% spiritual capacity is enough to give us consciousness and to like move our bodies, right? To animate the suit and to have a whole human experience. But when you unlock greater spiritual potential, then it's like, I don't know, girl. What would I know? Hello? That's when you get into the other stuff. This is the beginnings of the other stuff. And I think this is why I wanted to pull the Wild Unknown Alchemy, because of the vessel in the Wild Unknown Alchemy, which because I went on a walk, right? I got my walk in early. I don't know what's happened to me, but it's going to be warm today. And I don't feel like walking in the heat, but I don't want the heat to be an excuse. So I went walking in the morning. And I was like, I kind of love it. The thing that I like about, I don't often go out at night for reasons, but the thing that I like about being active at night is like everyone else is asleep. And if you get up early enough, that's still true. Plus, you have some light, especially in the summer when the sun rises at like 5:30 a.m. Anyway, can I get some focus? Am I going to do that? I kind of want to do that. I had the thought to look around the vessel. I don't even know if I don't remember why I had the thought to look before and after the vessel. I remember thinking that. I don't think I had tied it to that energy. It's interesting. So that fire ether, I mentioned that because we also had this card too. The next three is fire, ether life, right? So that's when we have that heavenly fire pumping through our veins rather than that watery blood. And that's what causes the um, physiological change. And then we have hooded unseeing. And then we have earth grab, right? So you could almost say this is a like the earth experience sort of conceals that spark. Conceals may be a strong word, but yeah, it limits. It's a limiter on that spark, right? If you're pure soul without a body, then you're a pure soul, and you are that spark, or you're more of that spark. Let's say spirit and soul. I'm like kind of low key obsessed. Obsessed isn't the word. I am very interested in recently this distinction between the spirit and the soul. So which is the water and the fire in the disology. And even then, I'm like, I think I'm like starting to reach it though, because it's like the spirit is the embodied soul. It's the ratio or fraction of the soul that we have access to. It's the thing that animates our bodies. It's our spirits, right? Anyway, there is no focus today, but that's fine. I can't talk about. I miss the Oracle days, and also I need to focus. I mean, I can. Yeah, yeah. Yep. Okay, cool. I think I. Oh, I am loving this. I'm loving these. Okay, so we have this trio, right? Fire, ether, life. This may be 5 cards. This fire ether life is hooded and unseen. It's almost like a smothered flame, right? If you have a campfire that you want to put out, sometimes you smother it and then it'll put it out, right? You put a bunch of dirt over it. It's also interesting because this almost harkens to is it I Ching number 36, Darken the Light? It might be, it may not be. I Ching number 36. It doesn't matter. It harkens back to that I Ching 36, Darken the Light, right? Someone's light has been hooded or unseen. And the next 2 cards, we have your ill world serpent, which plays into that Ouroboros energy. We've been seeing the Ouroboros a lot lately. When it bites its own tail, you could say that is the flame being smothered by the experience, Earthgrab. But after that is burst free at bursting, burst out and free. Right? So the snake lets go of its tail, and then all of a sudden, what was being concealed is just like it emerges. It's no longer hidden. Cool. Okay. We're still looking for the cards that we're looking for. All right. What am I looking for? I'm looking for a tier and I'm looking for Ganungagat. All right, cool. Got it. And I know what both of these look like. Here's nope, that's Bifrost. That's Bifrost. The yellows are getting me today. Like with 12, I didn't even really see the yellow. I just saw the blue. It's back. Os Godmouth. Now before, this was before Was. Oswas. Godmouth and Sap. Interesting. Ganunga Gap. And then Apple Bear. Fruit bearing again. Now, what's interesting, again, because we've already mentioned that whole the spark, right? After this fruit bearing offer is Ken. Again, Ken was there last time. Torch Divine Spark. The fruit that this bears, it's literally this God mouth fruit bearing divine spark. Right? And, it feels like that makes sense. Right? It's basically the child, right? That's what an acorn is. It's like a tree baby. And then you plant the acorn and it grows, right? That's what the fruit is. Cool. I wanna. Yeah, it's fine. We still are looking for tier. We have Haggle, Hail Weathering, which we actually did see last time. This was the one because we saw hell returning light, right? And then we saw that rune, and it was like the two lines had merged into one because it was situated between the two, and it's giving the cohesion. We have tear, smelt, and then here's another room that we also saw, hang true, which I love. So under that is shadow nutrients and sunstetta, the solstice community room. Now we should be coming up on the summer. No, because that's Cancer season, which is July. So in like 2 months, a little less than 2 months, 2 months from now, is it the day out of time? Is the day out of time the 25th? And then the new galactic year starts on the 26th? I think that's how it works. I don't remember. It's been a minute. Anyway. And it's interesting. Oh, and then there's Wickedcraft again. Cool. Because I was going to say it's interesting that we have this shadow rune. And then because of how I flubbed this one, there is actually a shadow on this side. I kind of want to hang on to these two. And then before that was Owl Senses. Ooh. Seeing in the dark, being able to discern shadows from the darkness. I kind of want to keep both of these. It's interesting to me because look, and then we have the future here. We saw the future and the all room before, and that came up to signify align with that whole. It's the path that Odin can't see because of the eye that he sacrificed, and because he only hanged for 9 days. Thinking anyway, it's fine. But it's interesting because we have the future here under owl senses, the owl that can discern the shadow from, and it feels like this. Okay, I'm keeping this. We're taking this too because it that plays into this whole thing. It's because anyway, under Wickedcraft, the reason why I bring it up, mention it, is because onwardness, the present gateway, is here under Wickedcraft. So it sees it as open rather than it being barred like the future. And I love the browns and greens giving this like foresty, wooded, almost overgrown ash personal Yggdrasil with Windhorn Unbound. I love all of this. This is the rune that was on the back of the fire and lightning. The one that the King of Cups in reverse tried to make a bind rune to approximate. Ash used to follow. I used to see Ash like all the time. And it's the personal Yggdrasil tree, which makes, excuse me, so much sense. Ash, okay, it's fine. All right, so the thing that I was noticing, and I got all these runes on the table. I wish I could read them. You know what I mean? Because it's like the runes have names, but they also make sounds. So when you string them together, you read them as words, and you don't necessarily like. Just like within any language, question mark. Well, with any non-phonetic language, when you see letters strung together, you read them as words, right? Like READ. You read them. You don't READ THEM. You don't just say the letters, you read them as words. That's why I wish I could like read them as words. Anyway, it's fine. So the thing this caught my attention. this shadows nutrients with this solstice community sunstead because it's almost like this part is lifted off of the ground, right? It's almost like, where's my arm? This way? It's almost, let's do it. I don't know. Come on. Help me. I'm struggling. It's like you have this plane, right? But it's like this. Like this part is raised, but the raised part casts a shadow. So if you're looking at the shadow, it would look like a consistent line, right? There are actually two lines there. There's the gray one and then like the black one, right? There's a gray line and a black line. If you look at the black line, you can tell that it's actually raised. But if you look at the gray line, it looks straight. The gray line is a straight line, but it's the shadow of the black line. So it's not actually flat, but it looks flat. It's an optical illusion, right? That is cast because of the shadow. But with these owl senses, the eyesight of the owl is powerful enough to, in the dark, distinguish the black line from the shadow that it casts. And that's why on the other side, we see this wide open gateway rather than this like barred future. Because it's almost like if you can't differentiate the darkness from the shadow, if you can't differentiate the black from the shadow it casts, you would think it's like all the same line, but it's not. And it feels like that's important. Maybe that's the thing that can't, I don't want to say that's the thing that Odin can't see, but that's the thing that Odin can't see. And it's almost like how if you only have one eye, you may lose like depth perception because you don't have like 2 points, two oculi to like observe things from. You don't have like 2 points of reference to give you depth as a relative differentiation between these two different points. If you only have one point of reference, then there's nothing to like contend with it, to like deepen it. I think Mercury is retrograding water signs this year. I'm like, is Mercury retrograding? No. If that, I feel like it makes sense. Like that's why. So the tie, and you see two big old eyes in this wool card. Not only do they let in a lot of light, giving it that night vision, but the vision is also sharp enough that even in the dark, it can differentiate shadow from darkness. Excuse me. So it's almost like metaphorically, it's almost like you know how if like you put something closer to the source to a source of light, it'll cast like a bigger, more defined shadow. It's almost like owl senses is able to within that elongated shadow still discern the actual thing. I may not do this well, but I'm gonna do it. We'll see how well I can do this. This is why I love this one. I mean, I'm sure you can do this with anything, but let's go to a blank canvas. Move. Oh wait, is it this? I guess it is this. Start drawing. No, we'll delete that. We don't need that. So it's like If you have this green source of light, that's like putting out stuff, right? And then you have, let's make it blue. No, let's make it let's make it another color. Let's not make it blue. Let's make it red. You have this red ball here. Now I could shade the red ball to make it look more spherical, but you know, there's only so much we necessarily need to do. Then this color would be like the shadow that it casts. This is the true shadow. Actually, maybe I should have did this the other way. I'm going to do it the other way. It's easier to just draw the shadow and then do the other one on top. This is a horrible picture without shading, especially, but I feel like it illustrates the point. I'm sure there's a fill tool on here. There is literally a fill tool. So let's come on. Oh my gosh, it filled the whole page. Okay, let's not. Let's go back. Go back. This ain't your Microsoft Paint. I'm like, why am I doing all of this extra work shading this in when I could just use the fill tool? Okay, I don't have to shade it in completely. You will get the idea. Because it's still okay. So with all owl senses, now let me blow this up. Right, you got the green light, the red ball, and then the shadow that it casts. Oops. Undo and full screen. I don't, yeah. Oh, this. Is this an eraser? There we go. Click this. There we go. Thank you, technology. I don't do this apparently. So it's like this, right? So we have that source of light and then the red ball. Now that maroonish color is the true shadow, and then the black is the elongated shadow because it's that close to the source of light, right? It's disproportionate. The owl sense, because it can distinguish in the dark, it can see, it can differentiate within the shadow that that ball casts what is an exaggeration and what is true to that thing. So in the realm of light, dark, and shadow, it can differentiate the dark from the shadow. Right? Excuse me. So if we are apparently walking this path from right to left, the owl knows that when you get here, you have to go up because it can differentiate dark from shadow. But if it couldn't differentiate dark from shadow, it would keep going down and then almost reach a dead end. Excuse me, because that's not the path, it's the shadow of the path. And at the end of the shadow of the path, it's this briars, thicket, blocked gateway. But on the true path, that again we see with Wickedcraft, if you know the Wackened Wickedcraft thing, the Akamar versus Akranar, it would make sense on the true path. And again, it's black. So it fits. If you follow the black line, it's raised. Its shadow makes it seem flat. And that's funny because we did see 12 earlier, and it's kind of sort of given that static energy. That's when it's a gateway, portals and gateways, right? With the personal Idrisil and the Vindhorn Unbound. I kind of love Unbound, especially here, because Earth Grab feels like a limiter more so than anything else. Cool. We have all this context on the table. Ue de la mesa, right? I think it's Ue de la mesa. Ue de above la mesa, the table. Actually, let's do it this way. And again, this just contextually it fits so well because we have hang true, right? AKA what Odin didn't do. And then we have owl senses, what the owl can see that Odin can't because of the eye that he sacrificed. Also, with this hang true, I love that on the other side of Tyr is weathering because that's what you got to do to hang true, right? You just got to sit there. Sometimes the blood rushes to our heads and we get hungry and tired. And again, we think gotten, we've learned enough that we think we can do whatever. And so we sort of come down from the tree before we've gotten all the information. And so the tree doesn't bear fruit because it hasn't reached a stage of maturity where it can even develop fruit, let alone have the internal resources to like funnel to make sure the fruit sort of like develops out. You know what I mean? Cool. I feel like, honestly, we could kind of end it there. And part of me is like, well, maybe we should. Um, and I feel like there's nothing like this is. I feel like it's sort of that territory where, again, it can be so personal for everybody. It's just like there's not much to say. You know what I mean? And why isn't there much? It's just like it isn't. You could say like it goes beyond words. I mean, maybe quite literally. Maybe the divine is the only thing that could like the divine or divine energies, a higher spiritual sophistication may be required to like act not actually accurately communicate what's sort of going on and happening. Right. It's almost like trying to I know sometimes when it comes to like Sagittarian sage, like highly educated, um, energy, it can seem like it's like they use a lot of big words just to use a lot of big words and to prove that they're smart or whatever. But there are some times where it's almost like the breadth of vocabulary makes it easier to more accurately communicate complex things. It's almost something that's so complex that it's not that you can't communicate it in layman's terms. It's just that it wouldn't be accurate. It would be an approximation. Right. Like I was watching this anime earlier today. It's a new one I just started because I was killing time for the sun to rise so I could go on my walk because I woke up early. Early, early. And this lady, this girl, this child was like, when you're talking on, and I didn't know this, so I'm like, for the purposes of this, it resonates. For real life, I would have to validate it, but for the purposes of this, it fits. She said that when you're talking to someone over the cell phone, you're not hearing their actual voice. You're hearing like a replication of their voice. Because if everyone who was on the network, if it's like if they were communicating real voice data, it would occupy too much bandwidth and it would basically crash the networks. And so that's why they replicate it. So if someone sounds different over the phone than they do in real life, maybe that's why. Because they just got the kind of voice that technology can't replicate yet. You know what I mean? I am curious if that's true. Anyway, it's almost like that type of energy where it's like sometimes more complex language helps you more accurately communicate complex thoughts or processes. And I feel like sometimes that's when I'll be like I wish I had a deck to like say this for me. See, this is almost like it's the kind of because again, it's because of everything, because of the entire energy of this. So I'm not gonna say it's just the God mouth energy or just the Ofurlagu. It's like when you sit in a space of meditation and when you sit in meditation and you reach that point where you have connected and you lose your awareness of time, it becomes very easy to sit in meditation for a long time. But when you sit in meditation, it's almost like like there are levels, right? It could be what when you reach the delta brain wave, girl. I don't deltas and thetas, and I don't know. If I don't know, maybe I shouldn't speak on it. Um, but it's almost like when you sort of like when you hit the either you hit the surface or you go like slightly beneath the surface. That's what it's like. You can get. It's like you're connected enough to get the benefits of that meditation, but not necessarily so in it that you lose track of time. And so it's almost like at it like 9 days becomes a long time. And also, if we take like an ocean approach, right? So, like, I feel like I set up the metaphor and then I think about all the words that I have to say. And I'm like, so if we think about a body of water, right? Sunlight only penetrates so deep because water it reflects. and refracts light. It doesn't pass through it as easily as it passes through air, right? And so there's a certain depth where there's no sunlight because the sun is already far enough away after the light passes through the atmosphere and all the other stuff. It can only go so deep into the water. That level of depth is like that's the surface to the you're deep enough that you're starting to see like marine life, right? You're deep enough where you have reefs. I feel like the plural of reef is reefs, but it feels like it should be reeves, right? It isn't. Anyway, you can see the reefs and you see the kelp and you see like the clownfish that live. There is a bottom there, but it's like if you were to go even deeper, then you would see the deep sea creatures. That's when you get into like your blobfish, I'm assuming, and your anglerfish, I'm assuming, and all the kinds of creatures that we don't even know about because they're so deep and there's so little light that we don't know. And in that space of the like we don't know, that's where like you lose track of time in meditation. That's the space of the hang true. You could say because it's literally the void, that's where the void is. And that kind of came, that energy almost kind of sort of came out. The image of the energy came out, but the energy didn't come out itself, like a very similar metaphoric image. Um, and that was between the abyss and the void. It was between like the difference between the void and the abyss. You could say that the void is darkness and the abyss is shadow. And there's a certain depth to which they are one and the same, right? For 60%, 55%, 60%. For 60%, the void and the abyss are like one and the same. But there is a point where they begin to diverge. And it's that divergence point where you'll find things in the void that you won't find in the abyss. Because while the void isn't empty, the abyss isn't necessarily not empty. I wish there was, while there are things in the void, the abyss doesn't necessarily always have something at like every depth type energy. Sometimes it's just like dark and empty. Sometimes the empty room is an empty room. Sometimes the empty room is you deep diving into the void, but like with the Ul cycle, and Ul is right here, right? Where we're into the dark and we encapsulate our light so that our light doesn't disturb the darkness, right? Because essentially it's like if you do this deep sea dive because you want to record or have footage or because you want to see, you take a light into that deep sea area, but because you're carrying that light, all of the life avoids you. And so you would think that it's empty. You would think that nothing is there, but in reality, the light is a disturbance in that environment. And so all of the deep sea creatures just like flee. So essentially, you can be in the void and think that it's empty, but it isn't. It's just the light is irritating all of the creatures that are there. And especially, you in real survival of the fittest territory, right? That's the anglerfish's gig. The anglerfish is this light that is a trap to catch other, to catch their prey. So they may see a light in the middle of the void and think it's an anglerfish that's coming to looking for a meal. And then I don't know, maybe the anglerfish sees it and they're like, oh, there's a anglerfish already hunting these waters. Let me go where no anglerfish is because there's no like the deep ocean is vast enough for us, like, we don't have to hunt the same grounds, you know what I mean? Like, why be in competition if you ain't gotta be in competition? I see a light, Imma go where it's dark and do my anglerfish thing. So it's like that, right? But if you can go down there and not have a light, then you get a clearer picture of what that environment, what that habitat is like naturally, right? So it's almost that kind of energy. But sometimes it is empty. Like, metaphorically, energetically here, sometimes the abyss is empty. It could be there's a certain depth where it's just dark. There's not necessarily anything there, but there's always something in the void. But again, without those owl senses, without hanging true, without proper sight, it's almost like where the void and the abyss diverge, someone could continue in the abyss and reach that point where there's nothing. And then they're like, I'm at the heart of the void. I should be finding like some creator one source type energy, right? I should be going all the way back to the beginning of things or to the place where the place before things are even things. She's giving uncreated energy in the well known alchemy. I was going to say like alchemy, like archetypes in the well known alchemy. But it's like, well, you're in the abyss. You're not in the void. If you were in the void, then, you would have seen somebody by now. But you're in the abyss. So that's why you don't find anything. Anyway, but again, and so back to the metaphor. So that if you're in the void, it's like you're in the flow. You're in that environment and you're so just like blown away by everything that you're seeing that you would never see. Maybe you're like, how am I even seeing? Because there's no light down here. Hello. And maybe that's blowing your mind. You're like, you know, that's what like you go into the what is it, Marianas? I'll just say the Marinara. You go into the Marinara Trench where it's so dark that you can't see anything, but then like your third eye opens and you see everything. And you're just like, oh my gosh, I've never seen the world like this. It's partially that. It's a whole bunch of things that take you sort of like outside of time. And then before you know it, you've been down there for, I don't know, a few decades helping Gerald build a city for the anglerfish. And then everyone thinks that, like, I don't know, the pressure got you or some deep sea creature gobbled you up whole. And then you come back up to the surface. I'm like, oh my gosh, where you been? It's been like 20 years. And you're like, what? 20 years? It felt like 20 minutes. The point is, it's easier to weather that when you are in the flow, when you're connected. Like, time doesn't feel like it passes the same. So now it's low key giving in the wild unknown archetypes kairos, mythic time, where time doesn't feel like time, right? It could be when you're at work or school and those however many hours feels like years. Or it could be when you're with like hanging out or when you're doing something that you really enjoy. So you can pass 3 hours and it feels like it's been 20 minutes. It feels like that, like, I have nothing else to call it, but Odin hanging energy. When Odin hanged, or to hang like Odin from the world tree, would be for 10 minutes to feel like 10 days. And so you go, oh, like it's been 9 days. I'm ready to come off of the tree now. In reality, maybe it's been an hour. But on the other side, if you're like really like in the whatever of everything, 9 days, what feels like 9 days for you could actually be an eon. And that's why like that's why you walk away from that experience at the world tree with the sight to be able to discern the dark from the shadow, but also with a personal tree. That's the ash of this Yggdrasil personal, the ash personal Yggdrasil. Your personal Yggdrasil, you walk away from that with your personal Yggdrasil bearing fruit that has that divine spark type energy on it. And then when you eat your own fruit, that's when you do the whoa, right? Take it as a resonate. If it resonate, if it don't resonate, don't take it. I'm still spouting that disclaimer, right? But like that's the energy. And again, that's why this is reading, or that's why I'm not surprised to see Wickecraft, because that Achenar, basically, just like there's the real Karukian mythos around the Archangel Commander, the Angel of Storms and Battles, the King of Swords in the SKT, being when Michael, like Archangel Michael, gives you a sword to do what you would have asked for Archangel Michael to do with his sword, and then you get trained in the way of the sword, right? With Akamar and Akranar, Wickecraft verse is Wackened. It's basically in the constellation of Eridanus, if I'm remembering correctly, in the constellation of Eridanus, which Phaeton fell into, which also makes sense. For a long point in time, one of those two fixed stars, I forget which one it was, one of those stars was seen as the southernmost star in the constellation of Eridanus. But after time, or in a different location where the horizon expanded again, like when we're going deeper, they discovered that there's actually a southern more star in that constellation, and it's the other one. And so that, especially with Eridanus being related to Phaeton, Phaeton was the son of Apollo, who thought that because he was the son of Apollo, it was his divine birthright to pull charioteer, Apollo's chariot. And Apollo was like, no, but all of his daughters and even his wife convinced him to let his son take the reins. And his son drove the sun so far away from the earth that it froze, and then drove it so close to the earth that it started to burn. And Zeus had to get him from behind the wheel in order to save Earth. So Zeus struck him with a thunderbolt. He fell into the river Eridanus, and that's the whole like thing, right? So what I appreciate about that Wickecraft Akamar versus Akranar with the river Eridanus is, again, you could say that Odin hanging from the world tree is the Phaeton that thought that because he's the son of Apollo, that it is his birthright to drive the chariot, let alone whether or not he has the strength and fortitude and capacity at whatever stage in his development he was to actually drive the chariot. He did all that. It's my birthright. It's my birthright. It's my blah, 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 whatever, to fail miserably and then be, you know, punished by the supreme god in that pantheon. And again, it's metaphorically and mythologically, it wasn't punishment as much as it was the only way to get him from behind the wheel, or the quickest way, because Earth was literally burning, right? But yeah, and then we have Windhorn with that unbound energy and frequency, which again, that was the rune that was on the back of that lady with the fire and that dude that was calling the lightning. But again, like the fact that we have God, which is outside of, well, yeah, I think in the Lafruma, this is the only rune that actually makes mention of like God, so extrapolated to source, the divine, the one. And it's with this. Oh my gosh, literally the seed and then fruit bearing. How did I not catch that? With the God mouth. So, the same mouth that said, let there be light, and then there was light. If you walk away from a conversation with, with an energy like that, you pick up a trick or two, right? And going back to the analogy with the phones, and I had this thought earlier of what was it in relation to? It was in relation to something like this. It's like it's no, yes, but no, but yes. Um, it's like there's a difference between sitting down with someone and having a conversation versus like having a conversation with someone like remotely through letter or through even a phone call, especially with what we know today, with what we learned today. Um, and just like communication that like you intercept or like overhear or whatever, right? The parts of a conversation that you kind of like can make out from the whatever. Because of this, again, this God mouth in the void with that fruit bearing, it's like it's meeting face to face. So there is no piece of technology that has the responsibility of serving as the in between, the mediator, the that bears the burden of the, oh, what's that word? Fidelity. I want to say fidelity, that bears the burden of the fidelity of like that conversation, right? Where it's like responsible for, it's almost like, back in the day, or even now with like carrier pigeons and mail carriers. If you can have a conversation with someone, you don't have to rely on the letter being carried by the pigeon or the person and delivered in a timely manner, right? Maybe it rained really hard and the rain just like ruined the ink. So you can only make out half of what somebody was trying to say. Or maybe something happened to the pigeon. Somebody shot it down and then ate it because they were hungry. I don't know. If you can sit face to face, it eliminates a lot of that. But again, it's like if you sit face to face with an energy like that, it's no surprise if you walk out of that conversation like knowing a thing or two, right? And it's almost like, but then again, I feel like that goes back to that. There's something about our ability to receive and perceive information, right? Because this is God mouth energy and it sort of follows the whole will thing, will versus alchemy. I was going to say manifestation and transmutation, and the whole like in the vein of the will versus alchemy thing. It's like when you walk away from the conversation with the divine, you learn how the divine speaks, right? Maybe it's a trick with the voice, or it's a way that the divine projects that commands creation, to entices, encourages. I mean, when it comes to the divine, commands the creation to, abide by what it said. Maybe you're like, and then like again, you walk away from that conversation and you're like, well, this is what it sounded like to me. This is how it resonated within me. But when we listen with one sense and we speak with another. So right there's like, this is how it resonated within me when I heard it. How can I speak to try to replicate that? That's where it also comes down to perception and reception. when it comes to replication. If it's not a straight up like this is how you do it. Right. So then, like, I don't know, you have this whole conversation. You know that the divine was like, let there be light in the beginning, and then there was light, right? So you have your conversation, you go home, you turn all the lights off. You like, okay, this is how it made me feel. This was the timbre, this was the tone, this was the kind of this was the everything. And you just keep saying light, right? You say it 15, 20, 100, 1,000 different times, like doing different things to try to like replicate it. And then it's like I don't know, you say it and it's not even that the lights turn on. It's just like light is in the room. And all of the switches are off. None of the lights are on. You can tell that the source of the light isn't a lamp somewhere, right? It's not, hey, Google, turn on the lights, and then the lights come on. um, you know, and then you're like, whoa. It's like almost like, anyway. And I feel like that's why this Ofrlagu reads, it's fine. I was gonna say it feels like something along this line is why Ofrlagu is reading different than the connotation I usually hear it associated with. I feel like connotation that I hear it associated with is a strong way. It's like this is why it's different. It's different than how I've heard it. I mean, it's fine. But I guess Ofrlagu in the way that I've heard it is to put something on, right? But this, it's a being. Rather than to put something on or to call in a favor, it's someone being able to do it themselves. It becomes integrated into like part of their being. And again, it's because it's related to a maturation of something within a person that allows the vessel certain permissions, right? Cool. Cool, cool, cool. Awesome. I am going to pull the wild unknown archetypes. And I think it's this one. Oh, wait. The archetypes are in a box and the alchemy is not. So if I can feel the box. Oh, this is the SKT. Okay. I'm cheating. I think it's this one. Nope, it wasn't that one. See, I would have grabbed the alchemy. I don't know where the sleeve. No, I wasn't. Wow. No, I was right. Okay. Hello? I'm trying not to get up. What is this? What is happening right now? I wasn't trying to pull this out. I couldn't grab the sleeve. See, there's a sleeve. I don't know where the sleeve for my wild unknown alchemy is. It just like disappeared one day. Excuse me. This card has a whole new connotation to me because I actually watched Full Metal. I finished the show this time. Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood, because Brotherhood is canon and the other one isn't. It's almost like that. There's a few different anime specifically where they've done that. So what happens sometimes is you'll have the source material, that's the book, and then you'll have the anime that is the visual storytelling of what happened in the book, right? Just like with books and movies. So what happens in anime is sometimes they will be making the movie or the TV show, and maybe it's intentional where they decide to take the TV show in a direction that the book didn't go in, beyond like certain characters that you don't see to reduce, I don't know, whatever. But because the books are still being written and the TV shows are being like produced, sometimes what happens is the TV show may get ahead of the book, or like the gap between the books that come out and the TV, like the books that come out and the episodes that have to air, they get really close. So sometimes they'll take the TV show in one direction, but when the book continues, like the book continues in another way. So what you'll have is a situation like Full Metal Alchemist or Blue Exorcist, where a certain up until a certain point in the show, it's accurate to the book, but the show overtook the book, and the showrunners have to come up with an ending, or they have to continue the story. So they continue the story in one way, and then the book continues a different way. And so what you'll have is a second season where, or a whole new show where that more closely follows the book. I hope I communicated it right. It feels like that is another example of that dark versus shadow type thing here. Where is it? Here. Right? Like the gray line is the TV show, and the black line is the book, the source material. So for a while, the source material was sufficiently ahead of the TV show that, they could produce episodes regularly and it would be faithful to the source material. But at a certain point, it diverted. Full Owl Senses stays faithful to the source material because it can differentiate. It's canon. And then, that shadow line is just what the writers of the TV show have to do to keep the show sort of running. Anyway, I finished Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood. So that temple card means like there's a whole new world of connotation when that card pops up that didn't exist before. If that Wow, the mirror and the box. That's crazy. She's giving Labyrinth. She's giving Funhouse. She's giving Don't Get Lost in There and Get Replaced with Your Double. I didn't see the movie, but I read the plot and watched somebody talk about the movie. I gotta go potty. I'm gonna have to go potty. I'm gonna have to go to the restroom. Give me a moment. Oof, please. In a momento. Just making sure I'm not missing anything. I don't think so. Part of me is like, should I have gotten breakfast? Another part of me is like, there's soup. I love soup. Soup is one of my, if I had a favorite category of food, oh, see, that's tough because I feel like curries has become like a fave. I don't know. I may still give it to soup. There's just something about soup that can't be beat. Ooh, interesting. Number 37, the desert. And today's number is 3715. Could I have pulled before and after the desert and the shapeshifter? I'm pretty sure the shapeshifter is number 15. This desert because of the black moon and because of the energy that's already here today, see, this is almost the O for the goo. As TBH, when I was like, this O for the goo doesn't feel like the O for the goo that I know. And I say no because it's not necessarily the way that I read Ofer Lagu, but also like, do I read Ofer Lagu? Yeah, how many times has it come up for me? You know what I mean? To have my own sort of connotation and associations with it versus the intention with the creation of the deck, if that's the way I want to phrase it. And I guess it is. It was almost like this liminal space. Liminal both in terms of like it being a boundary between multiple worlds, but also liminal in it being something like a terminal question mark, a place that connects to many places. So in that way, it would still be a liminal face. It would still be a liminal space, right? Anyway, it emerges. This is emerging. So, in the metaphor of the depth in the ocean versus the abyss, it's like someone has gone so far into the void that they've emerged in another world. Maybe in a world that's closer to the divine or closer to. It's almost like if metaphorically, right, there's God and then the angels, and the angels live in heaven. But it's almost like if heaven was a city in, I don't want to say like a world, it would be like a plane. It feels like, flat heaven. There's flat heaven, and then there's like, there's, you know, there's the actual like city where like kind of, oh, it's just like where you'd find God and like the archangels and stuff like that, right? But then it's like there are other places where angels and denizens of heaven live, right? Maybe that's where some of the people go, right? You go to heaven, you get a plot of land in this plane of existence. Doesn't necessarily mean you're in the capital. You know what I mean? But so it's like a plane where the divine resides more so than it is like whatever. And things like operate and work differently there, right? Because it's not mundane. It's not earth to the point where everything is either hidden with hide or choked so tightly that it is suppressed. Words, come on. It's almost like you would get to that plane of existence and like truly breathe for the first time. The breath that you for air, for gas that your lungs hold, that maybe there's so much oxygen in the air on earth that it like bottoms out, right? There's a theory that oxygen is kind of what's killing us over a long time. And by theory, I mean I feel like I've heard it. Not a theory like it's published somewhere. Like with metal, it oxidizes, it rusts, right? Like we're slowly rusting, and then we reach that point where we're all rust, and we just kind of, because of all the oxygen that's just slowly, anyway. So then, once your body learns to do it there, it will adapt when you return. If and when you return, your body will adapt to also sort of do more of the same here. And so maybe you start, again, we're going to pull from something else. Maybe you start subconsciously doing that like prana channeling breath work, right? It's just like you breathe different to the point where you're like taking in the natural energy and sustaining your vessel in the way that your vessel sustains itself in that other plane, right? Like Superman goes to Earth for the first time. Yellow sun, oh my gosh, I have superpowers. Back on Krypton, we don't do this. Like, our sun is green. So we could do some of this, but like, yellow sun is crazy. And then Kara's off to her red sun planet getting wasted. That happened, right? What was I watching? Was it the Superman movie? With not Corn, David Cornsweat. I watched it on a plane, and I think she did that in that movie. She's like, "Yeah, there's this planet with the red sun, so we can get like wasted because apparently the yellow sun makes them so not virile, so whatever that they're like immune to the toxicity that is alcohol." Anyway, this desert feels like it's like emerging on that plane, on the plane where where the divine resides, and your body is a better conductor of the spiritual forces that reside within it, because it is like the gravity isn't so whatever, it's not as dense, it's not as heavy, it's like you can really, like, your spirit can really breathe into your body. Where here again, it gives us consciousness to move, to animate our bodies, but maybe earth is so dense that we can't fly, but over there you can because it's not as dense. Anyway, it's that kind of energy. The desert is reading like exposure to that environment, which again, with the thorn and the beginnings of this Ophir Lagoon, it's like it makes sense. Here's Eros at the bottom of the deck with the bridge and the prayer. Eros, the bridge, and the player. The prayer, sorry, not the prayer. The prayer, not the player. I'm looking for the vessel and the seed. Oh, look, the vessel is right there. Interesting. See, this is what I'm talking about. So we have Eros, the bridge, the prayer, right? We had those three. Then we have the flame. The flame, kin, the divine spark, also fire, ether, life, Feor. Again, the number may have changed or the rune changed, but the name and the energy is the same. The flame and the vessel. Literally the flame and the vessel together. That's crazy, as we're talking about the vessel being able to better support that divine spark. And then after that is the sustainer. The sustainer and the flame, the sustainer of the flame. And again, when we already have Earth Grap on the table, where Earth Grap was the energy of smothering the flame, now we have the sustainer of the flame in this vessel. That is, and when the flame is sustained within the vessel can do things that it could never do before. I mean, to say it that way and leave it isn't necessarily true because the vessel will always sustain the flame, but the vessel has evolved, will evolve, is evolving to the point where it can sustain a bigger, brighter, more intense, different kind of flame. That's number 24. This is number 51. 51 is a 6, 24 is a 6, 15 is a 6. 3715 is the number today. We have the 37 of the desert. Now we have 51, 15, and 24. Cool. We're also looking for the seed because the Gananga gap is a seed. A fruit is a seed with the ovum on the outside, fleshy ovum, right? Question mark. I feel like fleshy ovum just sounds disgusting. I'm sorry. 15 is the shapeshifter. The shapeshifter is in between. Oh, I love this. The shapeshifter is in between the bardo and the stone. The bardo is that liminal energy that Ophir was kind of giving. It's a representation of a liminal energy that Ophir was kind of giving. It's not necessarily the same, but feels similar. That's a thing, right? Sure. And because we're looking for the seed, the stone and the shapeshifter, this could be the seed in that shadow line. With Odin's sight, it's almost like that Odin sight energy wouldn't be able, the Ul energy would see that the stone is a shapeshifted seed, or that the stone is a seed, right? There are some seeds that have been dormant for so long that they become petrified, but just because they're petrified doesn't necessarily mean that they're not viable, especially if the conditions are right. Those Ul senses would see the condition. The Ul senses would see that the seed is still viable and would be tapped in, tuned in, or resourced enough to know what the conditions are to make it thrive. Right now, you're bringing an extinct species of trees back to life. And didn't they? I feel like there was some seed from. I saw a thing. There is a seed, or there may be a whole library of seeds of like extinct plants, and someone was trying to like bring the plant back. Now, some plants have the capability of being self-propagating, right? So with one plant, you can have what your stamen and your pistils. Pistils? Is it pistil or pistol? Is it apostle or apostle? um, you would have the part that produces pollen, and then you would also have other flowers in that same tree that receive the pollen to produce the fruit. So there's a word for it. So you could essentially bring an extinct species back to life. Anyway, let's continue. We're also looking for the seed, or you just think of the stone as a stone and you throw it away, right? And then it's like, oh well, you could have brought an extinct species of tree back to life, and maybe that tree produces a fruit that is the miracle cure for something. If the plant still existed, people would be eating it to know, for people to know that it's a cure to or for this one thing, for science to eventually reach the point where they listen to the people or tune into the people, and they break down the plant or the fruit of the plant to try to find what chemical is responsible for the cure. Like there would be a whole thing, but it's almost like without the plant, that whole line is disrupted. There's no plant to be integrated into the homeopathy question mark of a people, for it to be known enough that, this plant is medicinal. And so, and it feels like there's like a larger metaphorical context here, meaning it can resonate in a way. It's not, it is an aside. There's an aside here where it's like someone is praying for or manifesting something, and the divine gives them a stone. The divine gives them a seed that looks like a stone, or a seed. And I feel like we're going back to perception and reception, right? I'm sorry. We're going back to perception and reception, right? You're looking for a tincture, a balm, a cure. The divine gives you what appears to be a stone. Are you receptive enough to graciously or ingraciously receive the stone? Or are you so, this isn't what I want, this isn't what I asked for? I don't want to say, are you so much of a brat that you like throw a temper tantrum and you don't even take the stone? But that clues into that, or keys into that receptive piece. Can you receive the stone? And then when you receive it, are you perceptive enough to know that the stone is a seed? And if you're looking for a cure for something and the divine gives you a seed, let's say multiple seeds, because there's some experimentation that I'm assuming is going to happen, or your intuition and discernment will just tell you. Your intuition will guide you, your discernment will confirm, and your relationship with the divine, you'll know exactly what to do. It could be something in the seed itself that's medicinal. But I feel like even if this, depending on the severity and urgency of what you need a cure for, if you only have a handful of seeds, this is a third part. This is an element of foresight, maybe, that can be bypassed with healthy intuition and discernment and connection. Because intuition, discernment, and connection will give you all the answers, or will guide you to all the answers if they don't just straight out give it to you. If you grind up if the seed itself is a cure and you grind up all the seeds, you can only cure as many people as that limited amount of seeds will make medicines for. But if you plant the seeds and propagate the plant, you'll get more seeds as the plant grows. So you can keep making medicine and you haven't burned through all your seeds. Right. So anyway, it's either that or you plant the seed and then it's a part of like a leaf or a fruit or the bark. Something in that is medicinal. If you manifested, prayed for, asked for a cure, you receive a seed and you're able to know this is like the divine has answered my prayer with this seed. I asked for a cure, so I don't know what this stone is about. Like, is it like you lick the stone and then it makes you feel better? Like, I'm like, I'm licking the stone and I still feel whatever. Maybe you lick the stone enough that I don't know. It you lick the stone, the moisture is enough. The chemical on your tongue is enough to not bring the seed into like out of dormancy fully, but you're like, oh wait, like it changed a little bit. Maybe it's a seed. Anyway, I feel like I've taken this metaphor as far as I need to. But that is like a little bit of a, honestly, I mean, obviously, take it as it resonates. Right. But that's just like a little sort of aside, especially because the stone is with the shapeshifter and we're looking for a seed and the bardo is there. The bardo came out after the desert sort of came out as the liminal space. Honestly, like the desert, someone has gone beyond that liminal space into, let's say, above the firmament, because that's easy. Heaven is a place above the firmament. You're above the firmament. Things work different. Below the firmament, that's when it's like earthcraft. It's like experience in life on earth just naturally has the tendency to smother the flame. You got to make sure you don't let it go out. Um, I am getting hungry. Are the breakfast texts going out? It doesn't look like it. Sorry. Anyway, I feel like now it's almost giving coconut energy, meaning the seed looks like a stone because the stone protects the seed that's inside. It's the vehicle that the seed uses to transit whatever, right? That's what fruit are. Fruit is a vehicle for the seed, right? Animals eat the fruits and they disperse the seeds. So, more so than it being like petrified because it's whatever, because it had to like come across or venture across the bardo. Okay, it's fine. Let's keep going. Let's look for the seed. Let's look for the seed. We could take that in so many different ways. Okay. We talked about the abyss and the void. Sometimes the empty room is just an empty room. The empty room is here with the unseen. And at first, I was going to say it's interesting that they came out together, but I feel like this is, again, playing into that void versus the abyss, where sometimes the abyss is empty. That's the empty room. But with the void is never empty. If the void appears empty, it's because of the things that we don't see. That's why the void is the unseen, but the abyss is that empty room. Now, again, there's a lot of at least 60%, according to the room that I drew. I mean, I didn't create it, but I drew it. You know what I mean? A roughly 60% similar, the void and the abyss, but there is a difference. Should I have pulled those? Yeah, give me a moment to just go back and grab these real quick. I don't know if I need to. What's this? 42 and 27? Cool. I don't know. I don't think I'm going to reference them later, but if I want to, they'll be there. Still looking for that seed. Still looking for that seed. Still looking for that seed. I'm like, now I'm like, what's going to be around the seed? The seed is literally at the top of the deck. It's, these are circular, they're round cards, okay? These are pretty cleanly in reverse. The seed in reverse with the ring in reverse. The ring is number 57. The seed is number 66. The seed being 66 is interesting because we have the six of the sustainer, which is 24, and the six of the flame, which is 51. And then 57 5 plus 7 is 12, which is the same as 6 and 6. Interesting. What I appreciate about the seed being in reverse, and I'm glad I pulled the cards, it's literally because of the stone upright with that shapeshifter. What I don't necessarily like as a person, um, is that because the stone is upright and the seed is in reverse, there's almost this connotation that it would be fairly difficult to create an environment where that seed will break its dormancy and germinate and grow. But what I recognize with that is this. If I can get it off the table, is this tier. On one side is hail weathering, on the other side is hang true. That weathering here means it's not necessarily going to be easy. At the end of the day, the seed is still a seed. So when the right conditions are met, it's going to germinate. It's not a dud, it's not a stone, but it could be so finicky. Like there's an element of patience and persistence. And if nothing else, like patience and persistence, of course. So she's given a real like Seven of Pentacles energy. But also, like if there's connection, then the divine can just tell you, right? I just got a feeling like I should put this seed in these conditions. And then boom, right? Maybe she's your Khaleesi type energy, where the stones were actually dragon eggs. And that's as far as I've gotten in Game of Thrones. I'm on like episode 8 of the first season because I started watching Euphoria. Anyway, like the stones weren't just stones, they were eggs. And an egg is kind of like a seed, especially when the egg is a stone, right? Because you gotta like, with mammals, because the seeds are internal, you don't have to like sit on them. But with an egg laying animal, at least some of them, you got to like provide certain things so that the eggs like actually hatch into whatever, right? Sometimes you got to put a little chicken blood on it. The mom has to keep the eggs warm, or somebody has to keep the eggs warm, right? And it's like the seed is no different. I think, though, maybe that's the difference. And because that we literally started in the desert, because we literally started in the desert, it's like you can bury the egg in the sand. And it's like the desert is hot enough that it provides the warmth that the egg needs to hatch. It gets enough sunlight. I don't think it needs light. I think that's just the incubators. Um, but it's like the sand is also, there's something about the sand that disperses heat, so it stays at an ideal temperature. So it's almost like literally all you have to do is like bury the egg in the sand. Just like this hand. Oh my gosh, maybe that's literally it. And then this hand popped out. The hand popping out is like the seed germinating. The seed was buried in the sand. But instead of a plant popping out, this is like your new hand, right? Your spirit hand. So you can do magic with your left hand. You can command the whatever with your left hand because that's what's popped up from this desert. Cool. Anyway, and the ring is commitment. I'm not surprised to see the ring as commitment when we have, again, this weathering here with this hang true energy. Odin's sight would see the egg as a dud, or would see the seed as a stone because it tried a few different conditions for the plants that it knows about, and it only waited like 2 days. And so it like dug up the seed and threw it away. Type energy. Interesting that the shadow was here. And the mystic. The shadow, the mystic, and the mother. Under the mother is the threshold, if you're curious, if you want a little bit more of that liminal space bardo type energy. Anyway, the shadow was real interesting because we talked about dark versus, the shadow plus the mystic. This is giving Ul energy, especially where Ul is the ability to discern dark from shadow. Ul has the ability to discern that this stone is actually a seed. Cool. Because the Yggdrasil card is here, there is an additional layer to this of the seeds that you produce. Right. So it is very like, just because you haven't necessarily found success in a certain arena yet doesn't mean that you're not destined for whatever you're destined for. Maybe you haven't found your audience, or maybe you haven't had it's like, you'll encounter 13 no's before you get a yes. And that yes is the one that you need to kickstart stuff. If you knew that, it would be easier to handle the rejection of the first, and then the second, and then the fifth, and then the ninth, and the 10th, and the 11th. No. If you knew that after 13 rejections, you'll get a yes, and that yes will change your life. But if you don't know that, it wears on you. And maybe you step away before you hit that yes. Right? It happened to a few people in history. Some of them apparently associated with magic. I don't know what this is. Didn't it happen to Justin Kelly? Justin Kelly, Rolling Stone? I think I heard that there were like a lot of no's from different publishers before she got a yes. Anyway. What does that have to do with Tyr, I hear some of you say? When it came to Frigg, there was a whole thing. I feel like it's obvious. Not to be condescending. Again, it's because so we had that petrified seed that appeared to be a stone, right? With Tyr sort of sitting in the place of that old supreme uh, deity, it's almost like a relic. Tyr is a relic of a time before Odin. And in that time before Odin, things were, I don't want to say better, but different. Things were different. In a time before Odin, it's almost like Earth wasn't it's almost like in a time before Odin, Earth was closer to heaven. In a time before Odin, in a time before the veil, where we lived, where spirit was neighbor, and you'd see angels roaming the streets. before they were like, oh, girl, people are like humans are kind of getting a little like, you know, the second angel just went down. It's never happened before, and the humans are saying they don't know what's up, but we're seeing humans doing some stuff that the humans weren't doing before. Yeah, I think it's time that girl, you might have to find somewhere else to go. It's time to go back above the firmament. We try to come down and be neighborly, and look what they do to us. And then things change, right? Earth got denser, life got more difficult in a way where it's, you could say, like before and after Eve and then Adam ate the apple, what the human experience was. Um, there was a point in time where just being alive on Earth didn't necessarily mean that your spark and your flame was being smothered on the daily. I mean, you could even say within like our lifetime, some of us, uh, like honestly, the experience that some of us hasn't changed maybe as much recently, but for a lot of folks, the world, it's almost like it was easier at the very least to be out and about in the world and not necessarily like fighting for your sanity constantly because something else is happening. You know what I mean? But like in your face and like blatantly, right? There are things that have been happening for a while, but it wasn't necessarily always in our faces. And, maybe sometimes we could pretend like it wasn't happening. But yeah, it's like it was a different time, man. And I don't know. It is that's the you could say that's the tier in it. But that tier energy was never set up as a person like that Odin and Frigg energy were more obviously people. People is a strong word. Frigg is like or not Frigg. Tyr is like a state of being. It's a state of consciousness, right? Tyr is at 144 hertz type energy. It's not like the divine or devil energy or whatever. Right? Cool. Sure. The lyrics to that song are, am I gonna eat or am I gonna sleep more? Am I gonna eat or am I gonna sleep? Eat or sleep, eat or sleep, eat or sleep, eat or sleep. Condyle at the cut. Cosmic light ulcer. The ulcer of that cosmic light is light being forced into, welcomed into a vessel that can't support it. So it burns. Or there's some other kind of like a rejection. And then hang true. Hang true on one side, the ulcer on the other. And again, hang true produces, and look, there's Hod. I'm seeing like hooded unsing all over this. Um, sorry. What was I saying? Hang true leads to the vessel that is capable, right? Mm, Hanging like Odin leads to the one that isn't. Interesting. They're both in reverse. So the desert, sorry, the desert fell out of the bottom on alchemy when I was shuffling. Bottom of the deck is the mystic in reverse. Again, I don't mind keeping these in reverse because, first of all, I don't think it's at the bottom of the deck anymore. First of all, I don't mind keeping them in reverse because the seed was in reverse with whatever card it was with. I already forgot. It was 12. It was a 12. It was 57, right? LVII. Was it 57? I know it was a 12. Yeah, the ring. It was 57. We saw the seed in reverse with the ring. So I don't mind the fact that the desert and the mystic came out in reverse because to see the seed as a seed and not a stone, it has to be in reverse. What I further appreciate about these being in reverse and being okay with these being in reverse is hang true. The hangman would see these as upright because it's hanging upside down. See? See, I clocked it this time live. I clocked it live. Sometimes I'll end the video and then I'll be like, oh, like it was in reverse because we kept saying hang true and hang true hangs upside down. So, yeah, it would see the seed as a seed because the seed was in reverse and it's hanging upside down. Under the mystic, on its side is the unseen. And again, what I appreciate about the unseen here is it's speaking to that void energy. Also, I further appreciated seeing it here with the desert because, again, the desert has gone so deep that it's reemerged into a plane where the energy is less dense and it doesn't naturally um, smother the flame just by virtue of like being there, right? And again, this is the place that exists within the void. It doesn't exist within the abyss. And so again, they with that solstice rune, and it's funny because solstice was the first mystery rune. It wasn't the first. Solstice was one of the runes that were proposed to the community to rake, I think. It was posted as a mystery rune of like at the time Russ didn't peg it. And so I took it upon myself, to try to rake it. So Sunsetter was my introduction to rune raking. It's the one that I took because I was like, oh, this seems fun. Let's get into it. And I just remember there was so much of solstice when I was like raking it that was like, tell my story, tell our story. It was like trying to speak to a peoples that had forgotten how to listen. And so that energy that's trying to speak to a peoples that have forgotten how to listen on top of the whole like, there was with because this is tier, there was a point in time where the divine and the mundane or divinity and mankind weren't so separate. And so for that to be the rune, I'm like, okay, interesting. And it's the unseen as those that we can no longer see or no longer hear. When Sunset, it was like, tell my story, tell our story. Cool. But again, the abyss, if you follow the abyss, you'll find, sorry, the void. If you follow the void, you'll find this desert, this place where the unseen can be seen. And with the energy of the unseen, you can't see the unseen. So if sight is your primary sense, and if your actions cater to you being able to perceive through that primary sense, it's like you'd never see it. That would cause that type of energy could cause someone to bring a light into a space where there is no light. And so, again, in that environment, everything flees from the light. So if you look around, you wouldn't see anything because you're causing a disruption to the environment. And there's enough environment for everything else to just go to be comfortable. You know what I mean? Like that's a single pinprick of light in the vastness of the deep ocean, deep sea. Like there's so much space. Nobody, nothing is gonna fight to be seen. Like that's not how stuff works down there. But again, like if that's our primary sense, and because we rely on that sense so heavily, we do something to make it easier for us to perceive, and they won't even see nothing. But when you get down there, and again, it's that same energy. And like we see, not only is there an eye on the unseen, there's a single eye giving that. And it came out sideways. Remember, it came out sideways. The mystic was in reverse, and this was sideways. If you look at certain depictions of certain beings with the third eye is not like this, it's like that, right? And that was that whole in the metaphor. If you're not relying on sight to the point where you bring in light to this environment where there is no light, to the point where you cause a disturbance, it's like you go down there and then your third eye opens and then you see and you perceive in a whole new way. Like I had a whole thing where I was like kind of hype, right? I was like, you're like, oh my gosh, I'm perceiving things in a way that I've never perceived before. And I'm like seeing things that I've never seen before. And like, it's all so much happening all at once. Oh my gosh. Cool. Full circle. Love it. 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 Also, you don't find a lot of water in the desert. This is just another little Easter egg synchronicity. You don't find a lot of water in the desert. Creatures of the desert are creatures, you could say, just like, if you go into the deep sea, you'll see creatures that have evolved to live in the absence of light. Creatures in the desert are creatures of fire. If you got water based blood pumping through your veins and the desert is what the desert is, it will evaporate out of your body and you will lay there a husk of a person. It's for the fire bloods. Is that why you see the fire creatures in the desert? I read a book or two. I read a series of books, plus I watched like a few episodes of American Gods. The children of fire, they be in the desert, don't they? Because if they was made out of water, they would be husks out there. You know what I mean? Just like with creatures of air, if they were as dense as land creatures, then they would be falling out of the sky. They wouldn't be able to get anywhere. Anyway, all right. Final raw room. I don't know if this is going to be upright or in reverse. I'll put them upright, but they're so small and squarish that they kind of just Gutton and oak. Gutton and oak. What an interesting combination. Shedding support. We have the energy of shedding support at the cut where we had weathering before on the table that came out with hang true. But again, that's the thing. It's like when support has run out, we kind of give up. And that's when we go, oh, I've hanged long enough. I've been hanging for like 9 days, right? That's what Odin did. And it's like, girl, it's been like 3 seconds. But the tree ain't gonna say nothing. You know what I mean? The tree ain't gonna say nothing. Like you came and gone so quick, the divine didn't even get to see you, right? Like you didn't knock or ring the bell or come up to the door or nothing. You just like sped by. You sped by the house so fast the ring camera couldn't even catch your car. Hello? And how was I supposed to know you were here? Type energy. The summer solstice room. This is interesting. So, cunning, I learned to know, is at the cut with flow first blood. And it's interesting because we have this solid blue line. First, we have a solid blue line. If we look more closely, we see the knot, right? Or it could be that part where it's more blue and then we have the light blue because it's a solid, that shade of blue at the cut. But what's interesting about Flirsa is that red ball. And there's no red ball here. And again, there was something about that owl sight that could discern the true shape of the thing through its shadow. I don't know. I was just like, red ball. I did a red ball because I was going to make it blue, but for obvious reasons, I wasn't going to do that. Okay. Ooh, there we go. We got a fall. We got looks like two that fell. They almost fell face up. So like they like fell and then landed in a way where they went face down. Like that. And it's one of my favorite runes with an interesting rune to see here. 65, 51. 51 was the card on the right. It was 24, 51. I gotta go to the restroom. I'll be back. I've been holding it for a minute, but ooh, there's something about a bathroom break that just really makes the neurons connect. 51 was the flame. 24 was the other one. 51 was the flame. It was what was on the other side of the vessel? 24. That's an archetype of the self because it's 0 to 30. It's gonna, I'm gonna just sit for a moment. I know it's an archetype of the self because 0 to like 30 are archetypes of the self, 31 to 50 are archetypes of place, 51 to 70 are archetypes of things, and then 71 and above are the special ones. So it's an archetype of the self that was on the other side of the flame. I cannot remember, but it's not important. 51 is my favorite rune. It's vain, weathercock, fluid. And it's interesting that it's blue. It's these two shades of blue that we saw on the cunning. I learned to know my summer solstice rune. Right? Because there was the dot and then the dark blue and then the light blue above it. And then we had Flissa, which was the dark blue line. So again, just like I mentioned with Ul being the ability to differentiate dark from shadow, the abyss from the void, this, it's like it zooms in enough to differentiate the dark blue from the light blue. But you could also see here that that dark blue dot isn't on the line where it looked like it was before. The other rune that came out is Wackened. Now, through this combination of Wackened and Fane, because in the Wackened Wickedcraft, Akamar versus Akranar, we know this is the Phaeton that was so entitled because of his birthright that he almost froze and almost burned the whole of Earth. That Zeus had to put down that fell into the river of Eridanus. Fane here, and again, it's because this dot isn't on the line. That's one of the ways. This is ungrounded. This isn't Fane for the reasons that I love it. This is Fane for the reasons that other people don't. It's like listless. It just like it continues to spin. But it's like a compass that has lost its ability to point. That's lost its ability to help somebody navigate. And it's because it doesn't go deep enough. Also, this is literally all shadow. This is the path of the abyss to which there is no end, right? Usually, it's like if you were theoretically, because distance obviously works differently. When you enter the domain of the abyss and the void, distance ain't necessarily the same. But it's like if you were to get to a similar place within the void, you would reemerge in that desert space. But the abyss is empty. This is the part of the abyss that's empty. And so that's why this weather vane just keeps spinning. That's why it's this image of a compass that just continues to, like, you can't even navigate with it anymore. Like you've reached the bottom and there's nowhere further to go. And it's this gray. literally the gray of that shadow line. And it's vague, literally. Odin's sight cannot differentiate between the dark and the shadow, cannot differentiate between the abyss and the void. Also, because Odin only has one eye, it doesn't have enough like depth perception to know that the blue dot isn't on the line. Like you could look at this and go like, "Oh yeah, that's definitely different than, that other room you showed me with the cuz the dot was on the line." And like also like there are these points that are coming out like that could just be it could be branching off. That doesn't necessarily have to be anything. But it's like with one eye, it doesn't have the depth perception to realize that that dot isn't even on the line. Like not only is it not on the line, but it's supposed to be like here, right? The darker blue dot intercepted the darker blue line, and the darker blue line laid on top of the light blue line before the light blue line extended beyond by itself. And not only is this like a perfect representation of that Odin vision energy, but the bottom rune is Gar, which is speared potential, number 33. And the raw rune, it represented potential. I don't know if the numbers, no, because it was 333. 3 was the giant thorny portal, 33 was Spiritual. So the numbers are the same. But in the printed edition, instead of potential, it's spear troth. So between the raw runes and the printing, it lost its potential and was locked into symbolism of a promise on a name with an individual entity, energy, a deity that has, I don't want to say virtually no integrity, but like if you really get into like Norse mythology, like you would know that unless you're Odin, a promise to Odin or in Odin's name isn't gonna benefit you. Odin's in it for Odin. And he's a great salesman, apparently. But this is like Odin's spear type energy. And so for that, and look, it literally cuts in half that Ganunga gap and prevents it from coming together through all this. It's like if you were to see the rune of beginnings, right? Because again, it's a similar energy to that King of Cups in reverse that tried to bind together something to do what that other rune was like naturally doing for those other people. Again, very Odin. It's like so Odin key from what I know, and I don't know much, but from what I know, it's very like Odin coded. With the rune of beginnings, we saw kind of like if you were to continue to like bend this line on top, or like bend it back onto the um, line and then like straighten it out, it would approach that. And it feels like that's what this is trying to do. It was like two different halves of the Ganunga gap. So Odin has speared this Ganunga gap in two halves to try to like forcibly create that Bjork type energy. And it's like you can tell it's not going to work. But yeah, I feel like, cleverness and ingenuity and creativity and all of the different like humanly virtues, there are certain arenas where instead of virtues, they're more um what's the word for like a character or personality trait that's like detrimental to something? They're detriments. There are certain arenas where those virtues of ingenuity and creativity are detrimental, especially when we're trying to be creative to get around whatever. Anyway, I still kind of want to pull. I mean, it's literally right here. So I'll do it. Why not? I didn't timestamp final cards or nothing, but it's fine. Again, it'll try to replicate. It's fine. You know, cool. So, but I guess that's interesting because the Wild Unknown Alchemy gave us the Desert Mystic that is capable of seeing the un. And maybe that's another interesting thing too, because it's almost like since Odin sacrificed one of his eyes, you would almost think that if he covered his seeing eye and took the eye patch off of his, like, he would be able to see the unseeable if he gazed through the empty socket. But he's just blind. It's like it don't work like that. That would be like if we were awarding like points for creativity and cleverness and ingenuity and being like crafty and quick-witted. Like if it were a Sphinx's riddle, how do you see the unseen? You gouge out one of your eyes or your eyes, and then you like through those empty sockets, you can see the unseen. This isn't a Sphinx and it's not a riddle, right? It's not something to be outsmarted or worked around or outwitted or outstudied or some. It's like sometimes you just got to be who you say you are and you just got to do what needs to be done. And I'm sure there are a lot of plants that do certain things under certain conditions, and there are botanists who can figure out how to trick the plants into thinking that it's somewhere, but that seed ain't gonna grow through tricks and lies and deceit and trickery. It'll continue to be its own. But interesting. Love that energy. 61 and 53. Yeah. So that's why sometimes like when I'm like, welcome to It Is What It Is Tarot, where it is what it is and it ain't gonna be what it ain't gonna be. Not only is that because the camera angle is whatever and the lighting is whatever and my hair is whatever and I still need to cut my nails, but it's also because there are some times where again the of creativity and ingenuity and like resourcefulness and craftiness and a mind that can just run wild, where they can be detriments, where our need for comfort or our aversion to confrontation, to being confronted, sort of has us choose and choosing lies and partial truths and other things. And then again, sometimes it's like we kind of wonder why we just continue to spiral or why we face the same roadblocks over and over and over and over. And before I'm like, well, it's just how the journey is, girl. That's just life. I'm like, okay, well, but are we actually doing what the divine is like, what our intuition and discernment like knows we should be like, are we doing that? Are we trying that before we like just perpetuate this spiral like nature of the journey, TM? Because I don't accept it. But, you know, I don't know. It's like before I accept that as part of my reality or before I accept that as an aspect of the journey, let me do the things that I know I need to do. You know what I mean? And not just continue to not it's like if you keep circling the block because when you're supposed to turn right, you're afraid of right turn. Yeah. See, there are certain points where it's like where I have to be cognizant and aware of the human experience and that like there are things that occur that are traumatic and trauma is not easy, but also at the same time, in the same breath, there are certain times when the GPS says make the next right where we have to turn right to get to our destination. There's no amount of left turns and journey planning that can get us where we want to go if our intuition and discernment is telling us to turn right. And so, of course, if we never make that right, then we're going to keep left, 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 left. We're going to left turn in a circle. And it doesn't matter how long you're hanging from the world tree at that point. You could hang for 90 years, real time years, instead of 9 days if you're just like there. You know what I mean? Anyway, it's not just being in the void. It's like you got to venture out too. You know what I mean? Sun splendor and against nature. Ethica. When they say why, and you tell them that it's human nature, and it's like, okay, well, human nature is going to get you spiraling and circling and doing whatever. You can human like how you human nature into some kind of divine whatever. You know what I mean? Anyway, the blue temple, the azure vault. No, that's the drowned king. All that gold just in the water, floating. That's that's a violent image. Yeah, it's like it's not a matter of passion or like you can't scream your way. It's fine. You can. It's like it's almost like if you were to apply a Karen type mentality to spirituality, then you'd almost get something kind of like the journey TM. You know what I mean? But again, that's that Phaeton entitlement. Just because you're the son of Apollo doesn't mean you can pull the chariot. And if anybody proved that, it was Phaeton. And all you got to do is take a trip to the river Eridanus, and you'll still see the scorch marks from the banks when he hit the water, fresh off that Zeus lightning bolt. And I feel like again, it's that Karen approach to a lot of spirituality where it's all sovereignty and entitlement and I don't want to say no work, but anyway. The Raven's head with that glass eye. See, that's that Odin type energy. That's one of his birds. They try to see the stuff that he can't see, and that is it's fine. You know, sometimes we just got to do the thing, and we are capable of doing hard things. So, anyway, cool. Final card, or not final card, just a card, I guess, from the Wild Unknown Alchemy. Even though I feel like this was probably just it, especially after that. Virgin's milk and conjunction. Okay, maybe we are continuing. All right, all right. Speaking of the world where the impossible happens, virgins shouldn't lactate because they're virgins. But here's virgin's milk right here. And guess where it's happening? In the abyss. Well, I keep doing that. It's happening in the void, not the abyss. I mean, honestly, it could be happening in that point where the abyss and the void are kind of sort of like very similar and or one or the same. One and the same. Because again, there is a good overlap between the abyss and the void, but you're not going to find the desert through the abyss. The desert exists in that point, part, phase, space, where the abyss and the void are like two different things. Synchronicity and rebus. That's the divine androgen, masculine and feminine. And then here's this thing where they're like separate, but like trying to get really close to each other. It's almost like the red and white rose, where they don't mix to create pink. And so like you can't layer masculine and feminine energies or put them in proximity and get them to produce that androgen energy. Like that's not how that works. It's almost like visually and maybe even somewhat biologically, the androgen has like, I guess that's more hermaphrodite than androgen. Maybe that's the point. The hermaphrodite is the hermaphrodite and the androgen is the androgen. So while the androgen has both feminine and masculine qualities, it's not necessarily like you just, I don't know. The uncreated and Venus. There's our void. There are the things that are born from the void through the love of the creator, right? Things like light. So we can see. Excuse me. So a lot of creation can see, but the divine don't need light to see. Hello. Obviously, it only said let there be light when it initiated creation for the folks and the things that need light to see. Magnum opus is the bottom of the deck again, number 61. Let's see. Let's see. Our card came out face down. It is no. Interestingly enough, we see the number 51 again. The first time we saw 51, it was the flame. And it was the flame next to the vessel. I was like, perfect. Literally, that's what this whole thing sort of is visually. And then we saw 51 in the runes, which was Vane, Weathercock, which I usually love through its like adaptability. But today, especially with that whacking, especially with the spirit potential on the bottom of the deck, cutting that void in two, um, it felt aimless. For me, when I see the vein, it points in the direction that the wind is blowing. I don't like 9 times out of 10, I don't read it as aimless, but it was aimless today. We see the number 51 again. 51 in the wild unknown alchemy is Massa Confusa or chaos. Also, we have that same moon when the desert was in reverse. No, with the desert, that's that same black moon that's in the sky. But here it almost looks like a forest of trees and not the desert, right? This is giving that void. Honestly, I was going to say this is giving that void energy, but this is a liminal space within dark places. This is like that point where the abyss and the void break off into separate realms, domains, whatever. Because it's like on one side, you see the webs of Thanatos and Pluto. Down here, you see the moon, which again, we saw as the desert. And over here, it's like you see these figures or characters, monuments, Excuse me, I'm not surprised to see chaos with the void because the void is very chaotic through nature of it being like an unformed place where everything is possible and happening at the same time that nothing is, right? This is a difference of 10 between 51 and 61. 10 in Roman numerals is X. X is the rune of the gift. So obviously, to have the gift, talent, skill, ability, or the earned proficiency, I want to say, it creates a great work out of these chaotic forces. And interesting, we have three roses, and then there are like three figures. Our booster pack right now, I have one more. I don't know if I'll use it now. I wanted to get like the tier sort of part done. Um, it's like a magic school type thing, right? And there are different schools or different disciplines in that school of magic, and there are different staffs, teachers, professors, leaders within those different schools. So this is almost giving that sort of energy because in chaos we don't see them like wearing any colors to differentiate them, but we see them in the masterwork. Honestly, and I guess like we're going here we are at Hogwarts again when we were talking about Justin Kelly Rollingsworth earlier and how I'm pretty sure she faced a lot of rejection before she got that yes. And I'm pretty sure that there are a lot of people that feel like idiots for all the money they just let walk out the door when they told her no. But also at the same time, with editors and stuff like that, who's to say that it would have went the same way? You know what I mean? I don't know if she had to edit the work at all. Anyway, the point is you get your Gryffindors, your Hufflepuffs, and your Ravenclaws. And guess who's front and center? Hufflepuff. Guess who's a Hufflepuff? I don't know. I know next to nothing about Harry Potter, but I am glad to be a Hufflepuff. I feel seen. I felt so seen when that little quiz put me in Hufflepuff. I was like, I don't know nothing about Hufflepuffs, but I know that's me. Anyway, this is an interesting energy. What's interesting about this energy is, again, I'm seeing this as like different schools, different ways of, because even when we saw the Ace of Spades, the Ten of Spades, and the King of Swords, in the King of Swords, Ten of Spades was that energy of like realizing the potential of something. But just because the potential is realized in one way doesn't mean that there aren't other ways that that potential could be realized. But just because there are other ways that that potential could be realized doesn't make the King of Swords any less of a master. Right. So it's like there are different schools within whatever. And we see like the leaders of those schools here, or the scouts, or the whoever. But as I sort of see these as leaders within those schools in this space of like chaos and confusion, I think of the crossroads without an attendant. And I think of the places for which there are no guide. But I also think of it wasn't Aries, the Ace of Souls, the Seven of Zones, and Judgment. Maybe recently. And I'm trying to think if it was that quadrant two, rather than like the divine being present to see what somebody would do, to see if they are worthy of receiving a certain gift or whatever. It's like observation. And I don't know if they're necessarily, because again, we're working within the metaphor of venturing into the void. So if this is a space where the void and abyss split, that would be why there's an unattended crossroads. Because if the crossroads were attended, it's almost like it would make it easier to see where they split. And seeing where they split is a test in and of itself, to see if we continue down the path of shadows, which was the whack end, which was the vein that was aimless, right? Which would bring, if we're aimlessly, oh, I wanted to use these too. I only pull the card after because I don't need two cards. I'll do before and after. Why not? It's giving the wolf, specifically the wolf, the tail of the wolf from the archeo archetypes, but it's giving even the wolf in this deck. It will guide people out of the forest, but it will not guide them to the clearing. There are only guides out of the forest. It's that energy, right? And so, because of that energy of like, there are only guides out of the forest, there aren't any guides to the heart of the labyrinth. I'm looking at these three, like, but they stand there. So, maybe if you successfully navigate to the void, then that's when you're like adopted into one of these, to take the metaphor even further. Or that's where we start to encounter the divine in some way. And even in that, I feel like I have this whole just like story blossoming in my mind now. Because even in that, right, that takes me back to the like through HP, we know that there are four houses, right? But we only see three depicted. And it's interesting because of the 180 flip that we've been seeing with the hangman to hang true. Um, because the color that's missing is green, and green is Slytherin, and Slytherin is the one that's most easily associable, question mark, associated to and with not great intentions. We'll say that. But it's like here the fourth faction would be heaven, question mark. So if you 180 the hell of Slytherin, you get the heaven of whatever this is. But again, it almost plays on that energy of like there's a whole sprawling whatever above the firmament. And if heaven is the capital of that, you're not necessarily going to the capital. So I don't know if these are like scouts that, is that the dragon? No, it's the shark. I don't know if these are like scouts that scout folks. And I'm shuffling this face up. I mean, I'm looking before and after the wolf. So the clam and the lizard, interesting combination. Yeah, it seems like they watch. But that also gives the energy of Phanuel, Angel of Truth, that waits at the throne. These three also give the energy of the angels that were looking down at earth when that shadow looked up and remembered the heavens that it came from. I feel like it's at like the crux of so many different ways that this energy has sort of come up before, but that's the nature. That's why I called it the liminal space of dark places, because it feels like it's more than just like the abyss and the void, or the abyss and the void are so vast that they might have multiple contact points. I don't know. Anyway, it's like when you get far enough, or when you successfully cross the threshold, because again, like this is where the abyss and the void break off. And so there's a certain area where the paths are like close enough that it's like if you're going down the highway and you're turning on an exit, and the between the exit and the highway it's only marked, you can still like drive over that part to take the exit, right? So like if you're going off to take the exit and you look and like, oh, this isn't my turn, you can still like change your mind and you're not like off the road. You're in an area of the road designated as like don't drive here, but it's still paved and it's not, there's nothing about it that necessarily permits, not there's nothing about it that necessarily prohibits traveling on it. Sometimes it may be like bumpy, like the white things will be like raised or something, you know what I mean? But again, it's like it's close enough, but once you have successfully navigated into that void space, maybe that's when they show up and they're like, oh girl, welcome to magic school. Maybe they're like, it's been like thousands of years since we've seen a human. Like, make it here, girl. Life on Earth must be real hard because we ain't seen none of y'all in a very long time. And you're like, yeah, girl, it is. Yeah. It's like the air itself, the winds blow to put your flame out, the waters rise to drown it, the earth itself smothers it. You're fighting every day, even on the good days sometimes, you know. I don't know. But now my mind goes back to that high priestess that we saw in the before tarot, and how she was holding the keys. The high priestess was holding the keys, and the Torah was like lit up. And it was like the divine is recognizing somebody or an energy that the Hierophant is not. And that's how you know the Hierophant is shady. Because if the divine is recognizing this, then as a messenger of the divine or as someone in communication with the divine, then shouldn't the Hierophant recognize it too? And if the divine is saying one thing and the Hierophant is saying another thing, I'm going to go with the divine. Literally the point. You know what I mean? That's like if you hire an attorney or something, because we're going legal, girl. Why not? And the judge is like, oh, yeah, like I'm going to dismiss it. You don't have to do anything. But like your attorney is already on your register and they're like, oh, well, we could do this. And we can, like, at that point, you know that your attorney is trying to get paid because the judge already said that the case is dismissed or like it's not going to whatever, like it's not proceeding. And if the judge, being the judge, has told you that you've won, at that point, it's like, okay, the attorney is like trying to get some money because the judge already told me that I've won. Hello? Type energy. Like if the divine is saying one thing and the hierophant is saying something else. I don't know. Anyway, the horse and the owl got the cut. Cool. I'm looking for before and after the wolf, so I'm not looking for a flipper fall. So I could have just went, but we'll go to. But again, but again, with the Odin that has Odin sight, it's like it's fine. Is it fine? That's the energy that when Odin first came out, when I was using when the King of Swords came out in the Tarot Apocalypsis, it was almost like the Hierophant is watching a member of its flock. There's somebody in the flock of the Hierophant that is diverting from the path, but the Hierophant can tell that they're divinely inspired. And so the Hierophant, it's like sitting back and it's watching them move to like try to see where they're going. But then all of a sudden, it's like they disappear from the vision of the Hierophant. The Hierophant can't find him anymore. And that's why when I was reading it, it was the Hierophant, the title card, where we see the fool using language of this today. We saw the fool stepping light of the void, the light of the void that you wouldn't see from the outside, because from the outside of the void it just looks dark. It's the void, right? That's why when the hand emerges in the desert, you're like, whoa, like there was actually something on the other side of the void. It's like, yeah, girl, hello. Anyway, it was the King of Swords, Odin, the title card with the fool walking through the void, not falling off some cliff, walking through the void, and the Ace of Swords with the runes that even Odin couldn't read. And it was that energy of like Odin, because of what he sacrificed and because of how he hanged, because of who he is as a person, it's because of who Odin was that he sacrificed what he sacrificed and he hanged how he hanged. He won't see it. And I feel like, sometimes, a lot of times, it's that like move in silence and don't tell nobody nothing. But it was almost an energy of like, folks won't even see it. They can be staring at you and not see it. They can be observing you and miss it. Anyway, the vulture at the bottom of the deck, and the vulture just waiting. The vulture, the black egg, and the tiger. On the other side of the tiger is the gazelle. And I love that the gazelle is here. Look, in this pure white space, just like the fool we saw walking through the void. And the fool's like, oh my gosh, there's light here. And then the folks on the other side is like, you think we live in the dark? Hello? Of course there's light. That's just the door. Like the door is black. So it looks dark. Right? You were looking at a closed door type energy. But again, I love, because of the connotations of the gazelle. The gazelle is like the vessel that has expanded to be able to accommodate more fire of a higher purity and sustain that flame, because we saw the sustainer. It was the sustainer. So the sustainer was number 24. It was the sustainer and the flame, because the vessel can sustain that flame now. And that may metaphorically be another reason why the void looks dark from the outside. It's because all the light comes from the inside. But that's literally, again, in the metaphor of the redistributed yin yang. When you go into this space of darkness, but all of your light is inside, so you're not disrupting the environment, where you can naturally observe. And then because all of your light is inside, your third eye turns on, and now you can perceive of the things that you can't see with your physical eyes. I'm getting hype again. All the light comes from the inside. And if you can see in the void, it's because, you've got sufficient light quota. So for those with a light, with a flame that is dim, sufficiently dim, there's not enough light behind the eyes to see or perceive anything in front. And both of these are creatures of fire. And behind the gazelle, we have the cobra. Behind the cobra, we have the lizard. All these creatures of fire, but more so the cobra. This is the master that approaches the student. Literally, with the masters that approach. Literally, the reason why I'm looking for this deck, because the wolf is the watcher, and we see the master right there. behind the gazelle. Cool. Love it. Love it, love it, love it, love it, love it. And maybe the tiger, because the tiger and the cobra are given this very similar energy. Either the tiger or the cobra, they're looking at the vulture. They're like, hold up, this one, like, don't get too excited yet. This one isn't going to be one of the ones that just wander aimlessly. This is an egg that is viable, that's going to hatch. Oh my gosh. And it's like you look at this black egg and you think it's a stone. You look at the black egg and you think it's a rock. Khaleesi, she said, oh no, girl, these are eggs. This is an egg. And it's going to hatch some baby dragons. And it's in my blood. See, Khaleesi was that girl that her brother thought he was. If Apollo had another child, the gazelle would be that other child. And the gazelle would be that girl that Phaeton thought he was. All you got in you was the blood of Apollo, or whatever gods have for blood and genes. All you got in you is a name. You ain't got anything that actually lets Apollo drive that chariot. You think Apollo goes, oh, my name is Apollo, therefore I drive this chariot. It's like, no, bro. A name is just a name. You can name a child anything with the hopes of whatever. And names do have meaning to the point where they can seem to, if nothing else, give certain characteristics. But at the end of the day, a name is just a name. A rose by any other name is just as sweet. So just because you don't call a rose doesn't mean it's not going to smell sweet. And I know they say that roses really smell like boo-boo, but, you know, assuming that the roses are sweet smelling. Cool. We're looking for the wolf. Who do... interesting. The raccoon is here. I literally just talked about the raccoon. Was it in the last live? I brought up the raccoon because the energy of the Israelites wandering the desert literally was here today. The energy of the Israelites wandering the desert with Moses has been coming up a lot. And that made me think of that one time the raccoon came out, and it was at like he will hide his face. And I looked it up and I read a few of the scriptures and I was like, okay. And then I had a talk with my number one fan and I went back to the scripture and I kept reading. And basically, like, God knew that eventually the Israelites would find the promised land, for one. God also knew that the Israelites would get there and lose all sense and all reason and start doing a whole bunch of stuff that they weren't supposed to be doing, and that they would eventually lose access to that promised land. Deservedly. God knew that they would find it and that they would lose the privilege of being there. I don't know what they were doing or whatever. I don't know why they lost the privilege. And that's when he would hide his face. He showed them favor to get there, but then they get there and act up and he hides his face. Sometimes we get a little favor and we think it'll last forever and we can do anything and we can get real ugly. We can get real proud. We can get a whole bunch of stuff. And then all of a sudden it's like we get in trouble because we doing something to get in trouble for. And we're like, oh, well, the divine will bail me out. It's fine. Do you know who my dad is? My dad is Apollo. Okay. He drives the freaking sun around the planet. He's the reason why you're not crispy or frozen. And then Apollo's like, you know, son, I think you're old enough to take responsibility for your own actions now. And I think this will be a great opportunity for you to start learning that lesson. So good luck. And you're like, what? My birthright, but my birthright. And then here comes Zeus with the thunderbolt, and he's gone. But anyway, that's that. This is this. But, you know, to see the raccoon here, I was like, okay, cute. The raccoon is on the side of the scorpion. The scorpion being Scorpio, being the underworld, Hades being the abyss. On the other side of that, here's the wolf, by the way. Before the wolf is the cosmic egg. And what I love about the cosmic egg is, again, and then the peacock is before. And for me personally, with the peacock, I love that the peacock is here. Also, there we see the peacock feathers, right? On the hero card of quadrant two, we saw peacock feathers that were like up here somewhere. And they're like third eye crown area. It may have been on her third eye. The card is in the box, so I'm not gonna go looking. But yeah, quadrant two, it was the hero, which was the 11 of fire. And then I was like, oh, I didn't really talk about the peacock. Well, the peacock is here on the side of the cosmic egg. The egg that is being warmed that has hatched slash will hatch. Also, we see the snake. Before we saw Yor, which is the world serpent. When the world serpent releases its tail, and then that's when it's like the sun comes out because it was it with it was hooded unseeing. What was hooded? Fire, life, fire, ether life was hooded, shaded by the world serpent biting its own tail. So of course, when it released, then the light floods out, right? And that's literally what happens. The rest is literally vulture food. So, but again, I feel like this type of energy is the inspiration behind like it is what it is and it ain't gonna be what it ain't gonna be. So us being real creative and like making like inviting delusion and projecting delusion and hoping that everyone else and everything else will catch on to the delusion. There are certain arenas where some of the virtues of being human become detriments, and those are the where we have to face reality. You know what I mean? You could pretend to be bright in front of other folk that can't see, but when you enter that massa confusa, the terminal, the liminal space, if you can't differentiate dark from shadow and you go down that path of shadow and you end up in the middle of the abyss, and it's almost sort of low key like if you don't have the sense to see, then how are you going to get back? Because depending on the nature of those energies, it ain't necessarily as simple as retracing your steps type energy, especially if you down there spiraling, girl. If you're spiraling and you retrace your steps, you're still going to be spiraling and you're not going to get any closer to out of there than you are getting closer to going deeper. And we saw that with synchronicity. Synchronicity was that like trying to press masculine, feminine, light, dark aspects together to mimic that androgen energy. It was androgen and synchronicity. And like the androgen isn't just light and dark, it's not just masculine and feminine. It is both more and neither. And again, that is it gets into that Odin bind rune, King of Cups in reverse type. And again, it's almost like it's some people, it's almost like if you can't be like genuine and authentic, it's better to like not even try to talk to some people because at least before they didn't know who you were. Now they're going to have this impression of you forever. And they're like really, 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 really good at reading people. And they were in plain clothes. So, you know, they weren't dressed to their station. So you thought you could just treat them however. And then when you find out, oh, like, I didn't know you were whoever, like, oh my gosh. And they're like, girl, You've already shown your face and you've shown the real one, the true one. So I'm good. Thanks. That one interaction meeting experience, that was enough. I know who you are. And you're like, no, no. I was like, I was having a bad day. Like the kids were being kids, you know. You know how it is as a mom. And it's like, yeah, I do. And I still manage to treat people with decency and respect. Crazy, right? It's like, oh, well, I guess my kids aren't as, I guess your kids are more well behaved than mine. Because if you had my kids, if I had your kids would be amazing. Okay. Your kids wouldn't be running me like they're running you because they'd be getting something from me that they could never get from you because you're not that girl. And I'm sorry that you've been through whatever you've been through to make you that way. But at the end of the day, like love and nurture and kindness, it has to come from somewhere. And unfortunately, your well is dry. You know what I mean? And again, it is what it is. And it ain't going to be what it ain't going to be. That's that Karen Odin mentality. That's the blindness that would never see the things that it doesn't see. And it's not that growth isn't possible because it is. And the divine works to encourage us to grow every day. But it's that Karen Phaeton entitlement that it seems like a lot of so much sort of pushes us into, where instead of taking those opportunities to like grow, we just keep circling the block, thinking like, oh, the divine is going to be like outside this time and they're going to see me driving by at 200 miles per hour, right? They're going to like the flash, they're going to see me. And it's like, even if the divine was outside at the curb, you come and go so quick. Hello? You move so fast, you wouldn't even see them. So how would you even know if they're outside or not? Anyway, maybe we took the metaphor and the sentiment a little, but again, it is what it is, and it ain't gonna be what it ain't gonna be. And that's the again, like energy like this is the inspiration behind it is what it is, and it ain't gonna be what it ain't gonna be because sometimes we have to face reality. And sometimes there is no other way about getting where we want to go. And if we really want what we claim to want, sometimes we got to bite the bullet and go to therapy. And then we have to bite the bullet and do the work. And then we have to bite the bullet and make changes. And then we have to bite the bullet and like live those changes. We have to bite the bullet and bite the bullet and like, you know, do things differently for a little while. But again, with Hang True, we saw weathering. It's all a part of the process. And every one a reason why Odin only made it 9 days. That could have been in reality 9 seconds, but it's Odin. Who's going to tell Odin that he didn't really hang for 9 days? Who's going to tell Odin that he ain't hang at all? Girl, you went up to the tree, looked at how high it was, took in a few details, and then walked away. And you know, Odin said he hanged for 9. I'm not going to tell Odin that he didn't hang for 9 days. Do you know what Odin does to people? Hello? People know. If Odin had really hanged from that tree for 9 days, that whole Ragnarok mess wouldn't have been what it was. Anyway, sorry. Not the fox and the fire ants at the cut. It is what it is, you know? There are truths that I haven't, like I didn't want to face. But I also reached the point in my life where I knew I had to. Like that was my darkest night. I came out of that and I was like, anything and everything I have to do, I got to do because I cannot survive here. I will not make it if I reach this place again. It was the motivation I needed. And, you know, it's reality. There's a lot that we can manifest. There's a lot that cooperation with the divine can change, but there are also things that we need to face. And we don't do ourselves or each other any favors by continuing to be blind and continuing to choose ignorance and delusion, especially when you have forces and people that will take advantage of that ignorance to do all kinds of stuff and you don't see it until it's already done. And that's just the space of one metaphor. Not even metaphor. That's like one that applies to a lot. But when you start looking and when you start seeing and when you do what's for you to do, and it looks different for everybody, then that's when things start to change. That's when things start to happen. That's when your vessel becomes capable of sustaining fire, that sacred holy fire, because with fire comes light, unless you're a zealot who's apparently dumb AF. And like all you've got is like zealotry and no knowledge, no nothing else. Zeal without knowledge is like fire without light. Ooh, the bat and the dragon. That's where the dragons live, in the void. Dragons like, girl, you know what they doing to especially some of them folk? You know what they're doing to dragons? You know what their stories tell them to do to dragons? If you ain't in the east, you may want to stay in the void. There you might get some respect. You know what I mean? Some other places you'll be hunted and blamed for things that you've never done. And yeah, we can stop that. We can end that there. It's fine. We'll just stop there. We'll stop there. We're done. Okay. All right. I'm gonna cut. I've shuffled this enough. Wait, I already saw the wolf. I already found the wolf. The wolf was in between the scorpion and the cosmic egg. There you go. Bottom of the deck is the starfish, which is all about regeneration. It's the kind of healing that's regeneration. It's the kind of healing that would be you in the YEW, the tree you, in the Lafruma, because it's a healing and regeneration that comes from the inside. And this is like that healing, the regeneration, the growth. It's possible. There is a difference between like meeting someone on a rough day, in a rough week, in a rough period of time, and just being a not pleasant person in general that has to pretend so that it's fine. This is like that. There are people, it's like if you're having a rough day, that's acknowledgeable and it's valid because, again, see Earth grab. Sometimes the elements themselves fight to put out our flames. Somehow, even the element of fire. I don't know. Maybe if the other fire burns brightly enough, it'll suck up all the oxygen so that our flames won't have any oxygens to burn. I think too. There's a lot that this starfish speaks to. But again, the starfish is regeneration and it starts from the inside. And so, if the healing and regeneration start from the inside, guess what that medicine is going to target? You know what I mean? Because it doesn't benefit us for superficial treatment that will let us grow fruit that immediately either wither on the vine or just don't grow, right? I already shuffled it. Top of the deck is the elk. I was actually going to go looking for the elk because when I was on my walk, I was going to go looking for a fire elk. And I guess it's interesting that we saw um, the creatures of the tiger, the gazelle, and I think even the card under the gazelle was also fire. I was going to go looking for a fire elk because I saw it was almost like a footprint that was significantly darker than the pavement around it. So almost like it was like burned or branded. But then I was like, that almost looks like it could be like a hoof and not necessarily like a boot. And I was like, oh, I could go looking for like a fire elk and for the elk to be here with the solar eclipse. We've already seen my rune of the solar eclipse My rune of the solar eclipse was with Felissa at the cut. But then we saw Vane and Wackend. That aimless, and it's like, well, the Vane isn't even like anchored because the dot wasn't even on the line. So it's just like, yes, there's this energy of like rejuvenation and healing that starts from the inside, but it's almost like too like there's an acknowledgement that there's a lot of work to do. But again, I'm not surprised because the very first, like, to before the tier was weathering. Last time when I used the Lafruma, we saw that rune of weathering with Hang True. I'm pretty sure that combination came out then too. It's like, yeah, there's this healing procedure, but not gonna lie, the procedure may be more painful than the symptoms you're experiencing now. But rest assured that, like, left alone, the symptoms are going to get worse and it could be a potentially fatal situation. Weathering is required, healing is required. Our life on earth is what life on earth is. And shortcutting it isn't necessarily going to be of any benefit to anybody. Again, in the domain of arenas where certain humanly virtues can be to our detriment, sometimes you just got to show up and put in the hard work. There's some work that because they say work smarter, not harder. Sometimes you just got to work. Sometimes working smart is putting in the time, energy, and effort while you can before things progress to the point where it's even worse. Working smart is putting in the work now rather than, having a bender and partying for 20 years and then trying to do it in your 70s. And you're like, "Ooh, girl, like if you would have told me that I would have to plow this whole field, I would have done it in my 20s." And it's like, "Girl, well, we told you in your 20s. You said that that was future use problem, remember? Or maybe you forgot because you blacked out. You know what I mean? It's part of those years that you don't even remember, but you were told, you were informed, and you made the choice. And this is the consequence. And it's not even a consequence in the sake of consequences. It's a consequence in the sake of it's just what happens as a result of the choices that you make. You know what I mean? If you wait until you're tired and you don't have energy to do something, then the consequences, you're going to have to do it when you don't have the energy or motivation to do it. And, when we're young, we can make those choices. Some of us. I'm sure that even when they're younger in age, there are some people that, struggle to do some things in body. But yeah, I'm reminded fairly often that I am not as young as I used to be. I used to be the king of all nighters. I can still do one when I need to or when I make a mistake, but I can't do it like I used to back in the day. I used to work them 12-hour shifts. I learned that I need sleep. You know, my night shift days are, I mean, I can do it if I need to, but man, do I wish that they are behind me because it was a struggle. Cool. So that was whatever this was. I hope you all have been amazing. Whenever you see this, I hope you're acting in alignment to make all that you wish to experience your reality. Like I genuinely, and that's like on the flip side of the it is what it is, and it ain't gonna be what it ain't gonna be. I genuinely hope that you are doing whatever it is that you need to do to get where you're going. I hope you're acting in alignment to make all that you wish to experience your reality. Emphasis on acting, emphasis on alignment, emphasis on your reality. I hope that you find whatever it is that you need along your path journey anyway. And until next time, yeah, it's been like finger is like gone. I kind of want to keep going, but it's fine. Like, I'm trying to think. Obviously, see, but these are all decks that I've had. I don't have to use a new deck. If I had to use a new deck, I would pull before and after the 10 of Gaia Tarot. I know exactly where the Dreams of Gaia Tarot is, but I'm not going to pull it. I'm going to end the video here. Even though the energy does come out, has come out quite a bit. I feel like I have a curiosity that I feel like hasn't necessarily been sated, but I also don't know what an answer would look like. They say that sometimes real life experience is the best teacher, and there are certain things that have to be seen to be believed. Anyway, all right, I'm gonna end this. As much as I all of a sudden see, this is why I struggle to like go to bed sometimes because it's like I'll be up and in the middle of something. And then when I'm finally like, okay, I'm in a good spot, I can stop watching, or like, okay, like I'm starting to die in this video game a lot. So I'm gonna get some rest and try to approach it tomorrow. It's like I hit my second wind and then I can't sleep, or my third wind, or my fourth wind. It's like I don't, and it's like I have to go to bed well within that window because if I'm just falling asleep and that second, third, fourth, fifth wind kicks in, I'm up. So I need to end this now, and that's what I'm doing. It's fine. I was gonna say, like, that I kind of wish to end it on like a different ish note, but it's fine. Sometimes if something is a little tough to deliver or receive or sharp, um, we can just let it sit. We don't have to dull it with something sweet because then, sometimes we latch on to the sweet thing. The compliment sandwich is supposed to be like an easier way to deliver some kind of like something that's you believe would be hard to hear, but sometimes we get so stuck on the compliments because that's the thing that we wanted to hear that we lose the critique. And the critique was the point so that we could do better. And there's that little fairy again. I forgot its name. That theory that was like unnecessary criticism and harsh words and bursting people's bubbles, you're sowing more whatever. But I'm pretty sure that literally the last word on that entry was growth. And I'm reading the entry and I'm like, where's the growth? Well, the growth happens when we take that constructive criticism and we swallow our pride and our discomfort and our other things and we do the thing and then we grow. But sometimes if we're stuck, there are sometimes things that we don't see ourselves because we are living our life behind our own eyes. We are listening to our thoughts and we have our intentions that we have when we're doing something. So we know what it's supposed to look like. And so we see it as, what it's supposed to look like. And sometimes we don't catch those little things that other people will catch. And if everyone was too afraid to say anything, again, sort of going back to the Justin Kelly metaphor, I'm sure that there are a lot of publishers that kick themselves at the money that they didn't make. But also at the same time, if the publisher that got her work, if there was like a publisher and an editor and a marketer, like as it was, it could have been a diamond in the rough and it could have been the polishing of the right team that made it what it is. So it isn't necessarily to say that they would have found the same success if they would have taken it on. It's not guaranteed. There's a lot of things in life that aren't guaranteed. So, maybe your destiny hasn't been swapped. Maybe you just ain't found your thing yet, right? Maybe that other actress or dancer didn't steal the opportunity or take that opportunity that was going to be your big break. You know what I mean? You could see what somebody else did with something, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it's what you would have done. And you can, oh, I would have done this better and I would have done that better all day long. But, your path is still unfolding before you. Do you not trust that the divine would give you something to help you, right? Like if you ask for medicine and you get a stone, something within the stone is the medicine. The divine's not just handing out coal because you've been naughty. You know what I mean? It's all part of that starfish type energy. It's all part of that elk type energy. Sometimes it's what we have to go through and grow through to, breach the surface and then blossom and be the progenitor of a whole orchard or field of some kind of plant or flower. Sometimes we're the thing in which a lot of things find their beginning. And it's a lot of responsibility, can be, and it's a lot of weight, can be, but you also have access to a very patient, very loving, very, as long as you want to keep spinning the block, honey, you can keep spinning the block. But when you're ready to talk and have a conversation, just come on up. The door's open anytime. It doesn't matter how late it is or what's going on. You know, the divine's never going to judge, unlike me. I don't judge. But again, at the same time, and because I've lived my own life, I was like, there are times where you got to do what you got to do. There are times to work smarter. There are times for creativity and ingenuity, and that's where breakthroughs happen. That's where revolution takes place. That's how Uranus and Aquarius really get their shine. But, there are also some things that you just sort of got to do. And it's like there's somebody for everybody. There's going to be someone who does those things well, and there are going to be people who actually like doing those things, right? And we're not going to get into a whole other argument or topic about that, but it's fine.